Okay, so good evening. This is the January 8th meeting of the Council Committee on Finance. A reminder that you're being audio and video recorded. Tonight the committee will be reviewing and voting on a positive, negative, or neutral recommendation for a series of capital improvement financial orders, as well as a free cash order, which will follow a presentation by the finance director on free cash, the order. And we will, so how I'm going to do it is we're going to have an initial, after a few business items, we will have an initial public comment period. Each speaker can speak for 3 minutes, but I'm going to try to keep that to an hour or less. And then I've added a second public comment opportunity to follow the free cash presentation by the finance director. And that those will, those comments or questions at that point, I would like to limit to 2 minutes. But I just wanted to, we're not going to take questions throughout the meeting. I wanted to have another chance because the free cash presentation is, is new information. So that's your choice. If you're in the public, I would suggest that if you have comments about the free cash, that perhaps you wait to follow the presentation in that period. So, and without further ado, may I have a roll call? Thank you. Well, I think you're muted, Laura. Let me see.
Apologies. Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Moulton.
Here.
Councillor Elkins.
Here.
And Councillor Labarge.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. We have everyone's here on our committee. Let's see. I would entertain a motion. Oh, first of all, I want to thank Laura Krutzler for the minutes from the budget listening session. Those were quite impressive. That was a big job, and I thank you for that. And so, yeah, we're looking for approval of the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of the November 18th budget listening session.
Great. Okay.
Second.
I
seconded.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Moulton and
to approve it.
I don't know. I thought Councillor Elkins seconded, but I don't,
I think Councillor Labarge did earlier.
Oh, okay. Let's go with that. That's fine. And so roll call. Thank you.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Moulton.
Yes.
Councillor Elkins.
Yes.
And Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Excellent. So I actually neglected to mention another thing on our agenda. The first thing on our agenda, which is the continued discussion regarding the relationship of long-range capital spending and free cash generation that President Jarrett had begun at our last full council meeting. And we thought we would touch base with that here before we move on to looking at the financial orders. So I believe...
I'm just making him a co-host.
Oh, great. Thank you. Let's see.
Good evening, Finance Committee. Apologies, I was expecting it a little later in the agenda.
Oh, got it.
But happy to be here.
Yes. Well, thank you for being here tonight. And yeah, I really like when we can do this and take some things, frankly, off of our full council agenda and digest them here so that we can have shorter meetings. So welcome. And yeah, just you can go ahead and and then councilors can follow with any comments or questions. Councilors are on the committee.
Yes, thank you. So first, thank you, Chair Maori, for inviting me to participate in this discussion. And in this discussion, I think it's appropriate to pull out the enterprise funds, and they are separate closed systems that aren't paid for by tax revenue. So the capital improvement program, proposes $57.6 million over 5 years for the general fund. So it's an average of 11.5 million per year, but it's very much front loaded with 16.1 million for general fund capital in the coming year. And of that 16.1 million, there's many different sources of those funds. About 5.1 million is bonded or borrowed, 4.2 million from free cash, 3 million pulled from 3 different stabilization funds, 1.2 million from ARPA funds, 1.2 million from the general funds, cash capital, and operating budget. So that's not before us yet, because that's part of the operating budget. And then 643,000 for parking projects, and parking projects are also treated as a closed system, kind of like enterprise funds. And then the rest is 707,000 from trust funds and reprogramming. And then if we look beyond this coming year, the future general fund average is 10.4 million a year for the next four years is what's requested. So what I spoke about at last Thursday's council meeting was, just some rough math of if we wanted to support adding $2 million per year to the Northampton Public Schools budget, and if you assume a conservative 3% increase over the next 5 years, then you would need to cut 10.6 million from this 5-year capital budget. But not just that, all future capital plans, because you wouldn't be, because we can't just defer maintenance. That would require future revenue that we wouldn't have in this scenario. So I imagine that buildings would need to be surplus, projects would need to be permanently abandoned in order to accomplish that. And all of these projects serve an important purpose. They support the operations of various departments. So to consider any permanent reduction, we would need to understand the consequences. And in terms of the relationship to free cash, a large portion of free cash supports capital needs, whether immediately or through 2 stabilization funds, the capital stabilization and the climate stabilization. I imagine that climate stabilization will generally support capital needs, although perhaps there's other things that it could also support. And maybe that's not limited to general fund. I'm not sure exactly what the plans are for the climate stabilization and completely. And then the remainder of the free cash supports the fiscal stability stabilization fund, which is our plan with planned overrides. And so the more that goes into that fund, the longer we can not have the next override. And it also supports the general stabilization fund and a portion to keep in free cash for emergencies or to carry over into the next year. So that's kind of setting the stage for discussion about it. I think it's important to if we're looking at different options, we want to look at and understand how capital supports our city. And if we have a good understanding of that, then we can make informed decisions about it.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, interesting. I have 2 different versions of the agenda up. So I'm wondering if you are available to continue this discussion and we should go to public comment. But if you, President Jarrett, would rather we discuss this and then have public comment because you need to leave, I don't know.
Oh no, I'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was expecting it after public comment because on my version it's after. But I'm happy to whatever the committee would prefer.
Right. Well, I don't want to have to limit the committee members' comments in order to bring in, to make sure that we have a timely public comment. So that's why I think that we should go to public comment and then we can, digest this and come back and talk with you before we move on to the financial orders. Thank you.
Sounds good.
So again, 3 minutes, and let's see, it's 6:10. So yeah, I'm hoping for an hour less. I'll see the hands we have. And so if you're just joining, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, or you can You can send a message. I don't know if the chat's disabled though, so hopefully you can raise your virtual hand. I see Alex Bowman, and when you speak, please say your name and your city or town. Alex. Good
Hi,
evening.
Alex Bowman, Northampton. I've recently heard a lot of serious allegations from a political action group regarding finances. I know it's hard to respond to every one of those allegations. Just to give you a little background, I am a former select board member, a former school committee member, and a former finance committee member. My kids are at public schools. You know, one of the things is that the schools have been chronically underfunded, and one of these allegations is that schools have been chronically underfunded. And I just keep digging into the data, looking into old budgets, looking at the school committee, the superintendent's report. You know, I see that 5 years ago, the budget for the school, or the city's allocation to the school is 31 million, and we go to 41 million in 5 years, which is more than 5% per year on average increase. The general fund has gone from 31% to 33.5% to the public schools. You know, the growth has outpaced inflation. I know we also spend even more on schools from the capital plan that's not included in the allocation, the operations allocation as well. So I'd love to hear the committee try to agree on some foundational facts about school finances to understand where there may be a miscommunication or just a disconnect on what the facts are. Because if we're not starting from the same facts, I don't believe that we'll ever be able to come to any real negotiating point. So I just hope that the finance committee can discuss, since the finance committee is focused on finances, that they can discuss those real financial numbers to validate or say, like, to come to some sort of foundational agreement about the state of school finances. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see Claudia Lefko. Welcome.
Hi. Yes, Claudia Lefko, 40.
Oh, sorry. That's me. Are you unmuted?
Yes. Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, very
Go
good.
ahead, Claudia.
Claudia Lefko, 40 Valley Street. I mean, I was on the school committee in the 90s, and we were talking underfunding then, so I know things change, but it seems schools chronically have not been our biggest priority in the city, just saying. I have a general comment, and it's a response to Councillor Perry at the last meeting. He said that he kind of took offense, I think, with Councillor my counselor in Ward 3, because he seemed to think we were criticizing the city employees and their work on the budget, that we were implying they were incompetent. And I'm wanting to say that obviously the city employees are employed, are appointed and hired by the mayor. And they're hired and employed by the mayor to enact the priorities of the city. And so nobody is questioning, at least I'm not, and I think nobody else is, the competence of these people or the dedication or the hard work. What we're questioning is the priorities of the city. And I feel like it's misreading us in the public to accuse us kind of saying, oh, you aren't, what are you saying? What are you doing? That's misrepresenting us. I think for some time now, whether it's around Picture Main Street, whether it's around the cherry tree debacle, whether it's about infill, whether it's about zoning, whether it's about schools, whether it's about the Baptist church, no matter what we're talking about, people have been coming before the council with complaints saying we are not being heard. And somehow the result of a good result, to my mind, of not being heard would be the council. And I appreciate the finance committee, which has been amazing to let us have all this discussion. There needs to be an avenue in which the public can actually have a positive interaction and collaboration beyond like working with our individual counselors around the budget and other meaningful things. So that's a very general comment. I would urge you to try to come up with a path for some kind of better collaboration, more than people coming to you, positing our concerns, and you then waiting. We can't hear back from you and hearing. I apologize to Quaverly. I knew her name, Quaverly, Councilor Rothenberg, my own city councilor. So this is my urging to you. Don't consider us as complainers. We are active, people who want to be actively involved and care about the city. So thanks very much. And I appreciate all the work you're all doing very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. I see Melissa. Are you able to speak? Melissa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. That was Claudia's time. Okay. Yes. Welcome. And yes, your name and your.
Hi. Okay. Melissa Bekaborski. I live in Northampton. I have 2 requests and 1 suggestion. The first request is that you consider the SIP and the budget together, not separately. They need to be considered together in tandem because they are related and you can't approve one without looking at the other. It's my first request. My second request is that the city gives the finance committee a written document with every single dollar the city is in possession of, which account it's in, where it came from, and if it's quote unquote earmarked, where that earmark is planned for, where is that money going? If the finance committee is not in possession of that, then we don't have transparency. There's also no reason that the public shouldn't have access to that information. It's my second request. My suggestion is that if the city is determined to continue with the Resilience Hub project and Picture Main Street, that you pay for that with a loan. I suggest that if you think the majority is on board with that, that shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I see Nan. Hi, Nan. Good evening. Hi, Nan. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was halfway through my speech. Nancy Smith, Chapel Street. First, I want to thank City Council for voting to review these projects rather than rubber stamping. It was a long meeting and, quite frankly, a long year of hardcore vote rocking to get most of you to see we need you to do this critical part of your job. You are the boss here representing us. You don't have to get quotes and answers. You just have to demand them. What are the cost versus benefit? How many years before we see savings that justify this huge expense? What are impacts to neighborhoods and businesses? Say no to a project that might be awesome, but we can't afford. Don't ask for a wish list. Ask, what do you need? You want shorter public comments? Picture a Maslow's hierarchy of need, but for the city. Then fully fund basic needs first. City Hall keeps shooting for expensive image projects to win some damn prize, where our basic needs, the foundation of our city, is literally crumbling. Say no to expensive image projects until basic needs are met. You do this, public comments will get much shorter. Like Councilor Maori, I see some projects and think that money could get us more paras. Kids are calling their parents to come get them because they don't feel safe. 3 special needs kids ran away from the school because there's not enough staff there. Kids in the middle school still can't read. Fights in the girls' bathroom are a regular occurrence. I don't want to hear budget percent limit arguments on basic needs. Fully fund needs via budget before anything else. We know the underfund shell game. People will vote for a school override, but they're never going to vote to buy a derelict church. Fund the school, put the church on the ballot. Basic needs, water, safety, education, or DPW, first responders, and schools. Fully budget them via budget with reoccurring funds. Labor shortages are inconvenient, but they are real. We do not pay enough to compete. We can't fill critical jobs. Last Thursday, I sat next to an injured friend waiting for an ambulance. Let me tell you, it really hits home then. Director Lascanga is great, but you've ignored her warning for years. Our water system is hanging by a thread. Imagine public comments when that happens. And this is important. If the reason we can't fit recommended size pipes under Main Street is a possibility of geothermal being there, say no to geothermal. It might or might not get grants, but we don't know unless we drop a big wad of cash. Right now, screw the prize. 700 feet of Main Street won't save the planet or protect cyclists. Saving trees and wetlands by ending bad market level infill will have a greater impact and cost us nothing. Curved intersections at the 9 intersections in that 700 feet will protect cyclists. Bike lanes and ongoing costs of replacing barriers will not. This is about doing what is best for community, as Councilor Rothenberg says. It's not about image or ego. If you can't do these things, honestly, you should go home. Rubber stamps serve no purpose here. But I want to sincerely thank you for this first big step. Please keep going 1 foot in front of the other for our community. We can turn this dumpster fire around. Basic needs first, and we all go home early. And a giant thanks to the community. So much of what I've said here is from you. Keep rocking that boat. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I see Tom Riddell. Oh, turn off the last one. Good evening, Tom.
Hi.
Hi.
My video is blocked, but can you hear me?
Yeah, let me see if I can unblock it.
Okay.
Huh. Oh,
There we go.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks. Tom Riddell, Ward 4A, Northampton. I have some questions, all of which I think the Finance Committee needs to consider. Number one, how is the $11.66 million of certified free cash being allocated? In the SIP and the orders, it's not entirely clear how the whole bundle is being allocated. Number two, the SIP has been submitted significant earlier than usual and ahead of what's outlined in the city's financial plan. The reason seems to be to establish contracts for work to be completed and to get an early start on projects. On the other hand, you have until June 1st to approve the SIP. I appreciate Councilor Jarrett's comments about the context of the SIP and the operating budget. I appreciate that. Is the rush to approve the SIP more important than the information you and the school committee have heard about the consequences of the position reductions in the FY25 NPS budget? Number three, the city's financial policy also says that there should be at least one public meeting to consider both the SIP and the city's operating budget. You haven't heard yet the mayor's annual financial trends and projections presentation, nor the superintendent's first look school budget. Do you plan to follow the guidance of the financial plan, which clearly calls for simultaneous consideration of the city's total priorities and use of resources? Number four, I'm a bit confused by the mayor's presentation about the certification of free cash. There's old free cash and new free cash. The old free cash has been obligated for the high school traffic issue and the city's work on the pipes for the Main Street project. Yet the allocation of funds in one of the financial orders, number 7 on your agenda tonight, to the stabilization funds is based on $8.51 million, which includes new free cash and the $1.6 million for the high school. 851 divided by 3 is 2.836 million, and the 2.836 million divided by 4 is $708,936 to each of the 4 stabilization funds. But the new free cash was only $6.83 million. A third of that is $2.276 million, and the 4-way split would be $569,000. So which is it and why? Thanks for your consideration, and I hope your meeting doesn't go too long tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Off the bills. Okay, I see Benjamin Spencer. Make sure you can. Yeah, good.
Hello, everybody. Benjamin Spencer, Northampton, Massachusetts. So let's see. Many of the capital improvement projects before you tonight will directly benefit the students of Northampton Public Schools. Some examples include in the IT department, the purchasing and management of Chromebooks, projectors, and other technologies to support student learning. For facilities, there's going to be improvements to HVAC systems and other improvements to the buildings for all 4 of the grade schools, JFK, Northampton High School, and Smith Vocational High School. And then there'll also be improvements to various athletic fields and recreational facilities. And I believe both public libraries will be receiving funds as well. So all of these will help benefit our children. And another project on the capital improvement plan that will greatly benefit the students in our community is the Northampton High School road safety redesign. The project will improve safety for everyone by creating dedicated spaces for each user. The redesign will make the area around the high school much safer for cyclists and pedestrians. Being able to ride or walk to school is a major benefit for learning. It has been shown that students perform better in school if they've gotten exercise beforehand. This timely and much needed project will continue to build on the ever-growing network of bike lanes across the city. Everyone benefits from having bike lanes, but perhaps children and young adults benefit the most. They deserve safe streets. As a city, we are capable of doing many things at once. The professionalism and thoughtful planning that went into the 5-year plan was clearly demonstrated at the last city council meeting. Department heads described in great detail how the planning we are doing now will save money in the future. We are fortunate to have so many good people doing such excellent work, and we would be wise to heed their advice. Please support these projects. And just to point out, the water mains that'll be replaced in conjunction with the Picture Main Street project, that's saving money. We're replacing the pipes while the road is being worked on, so we don't have to pull up the road to proactively replace pipes that are over 100 years old. Those are American Rescue Plan monies going to replace those pipes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see Steve Ilsley.
Hello, thank you for acknowledging me.
Yeah.
I am just jumping in today because I've seen the North Elm Street redesign
Can I
proposal.
interrupt you to get you to just say, for the record, we need your name and just your city or town.
Yeah, my name's Steve Ilsley. I live in Northampton in the Village Hill neighborhood.
Okay, great. Please continue.
I just want to jump in while the design is at early stages and say that I think that this design is an improvement on what's there right now, but it's not the best available. I would like to say the city send it back for a redesign that gives us separated bike lanes and better protections for pedestrians in this area. We don't need 4 lanes through that block right there. We could stick with the 3 lanes that are currently and splitting the left turn lanes mid-block. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see Kathy McNally. Sure you can.
Hi, it's Kathy McNally.
Kathy, can you start your video if you want to or not?
Yes, I would.
No, I just didn't know if you were being blocked from starting. There you go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Kathy McNally, Northampton, Ward 1. I wasn't really going to talk tonight until I heard Alex's description and sort of invitation to people. And it felt like he was giving a sort of convocation speech, laying down the necessity of preserving and privileging all capital spending that's happening. I think that the capital spending has gotten more love in the past 2 meetings than any grade or teacher or educational issue in this city. The one thing that is never talked about, and when I say that, I have a sort of authority because, you know, at SOS, we read all the transcripts. We go to the meetings, we watch the videos, we do the transcripts. We know what people say. And you know, no one that I can remember, and I urge you to make me wrong, has said anything about their concerns about the school, except for Marissa Elkins did say one time she's not so worried about her this year. She's worried about in the next 4 years what would happen. So I don't know what this year has to do, how bad it has to get before people will worry about it. So I just love you folks on the city council and the finance committee to think about when you have acknowledged what you think about schools and what you know about what's happening. It feels like a secret. It feels like a secret. And finally, it feels like the love of capital is so strong, and also savings and surplus, that we have an image, we have no limit. So we're living philosophically in a very bad building, because our building our municipal community building has no ceiling for savings and surplus. There is no amount at which we say we've got enough. But worse, there's no floor for schools. There's nothing that we've said like we will never cut beyond this. We know more cuts may be coming. So we have a building, a body politic building with no ceiling and no floor. Thanks.
Thank you. I see Danny McCann or McCain. Nope. Good evening. Oh, are you muted? Huh. Yeah.
Hello.
Great.
Thanks for having me. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of the comments that were made earlier. So,
Oh, Danny, could you say your name and your city or town? Because
yes,
also I'll learn how
Danny
to.
McCann. I live in Northampton,
McCann.
and so I'm a resident of the city. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of comments made earlier. Thank you so much for all your work, and I hope I'm in favor of funding the improvements on Elm Street. It does seem like it does improve the situation somewhat up there for safety. And I do hope, I know it's not really part of finance, but I do hope that, you know, we kind of push the envelope a little bit more on those designs to not just prioritize getting, you know, a huge volume of cars through quickly at the peak usage times, but that we kind of actually make that sort of secondary to bicycle and pedestrian safety and at that location, and that, you know, some other things like a raised cycle track with the sidewalk will be considered to separate the bike lanes and that kind of thing. And I realize those things do have budget implications as well, and I hope that the project is supported here. Thank you.
Thank you. Just doing a once over to see if there's any more hands before Councilor Rothenberg. Let me unmute you. There we go.
Hello.
Yes, yeah, city and town as well.
Sure. I can't turn my video on. Is it there yet? There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Northampton, Massachusetts, Ward 3. I actually just want to speak to bike lanes for a minute. I have been trying to educate myself on some of the conversations around picture Main Street and the high school situation. And I just wanted to summarize for you what I'm understanding that I'm hearing is the concern with these bike lanes. The concerns are, there are a couple. Some of them are just, they're really safety related, the concerns, right? So I'm hearing from advocates who want bikes to be treated like vehicles that are in the street, sharing a lane with traffic, as opposed to sharing a lane with pedestrians or being in their own lane. And the reason that they're advocating for that, being in with traffic, is because there isn't a great risk of a bicyclist being hit from behind. The risks to bicyclists come when they're driving too close to a car door that's parked, when that door opens, if you're hugging the side of the road next to cars, you hit that and you get thrown into traffic and run over. Or if you're riding next to a car because you're hugging that side of the road, by the time you get to an intersection, if a car is turning right into you or turning left from an opposing lane, you get hit and you die. And those right turns are where we're seeing fatalities in Northampton and elsewhere. And the problem with these bike lanes that are sort of giving people a sense of safety is that they do nothing to protect us when we get to the intersection. They don't protect you there. And that's that point of conflict that's so dangerous. So I hear from a lot of bike enthusiasts that they're so excited by these investments that we're making that bring awareness to bicycling and make bicycling a central thing. And they make it safer to ride your bikes downtown and to bring your kids. And I'm not hearing that that's actually the case, or that that's actually what the data says. It's not safer, it's more dangerous, and it's not teaching people how to be sharing the road with bikes. So I would like to see us, instead of investing in big capital expenditures for these protected bike lanes, which is sort of a misnomer because you're not really protected by the time you get to an intersection. Instead of doing that, I'd rather see us invest in teaching people how to safely pass bicyclists on the road and teaching bicyclists how to safely use the road and own that space as a vehicle. So I don't think that we're going about that the right way. And the last thing I would say about that is that Northampton as a city, if you really want to promote bike culture and make it great to bike everywhere, you need to take into account what the majority of the roads are like. And the majority of the roads are not wide enough to make a separate bike lane anyway. So I really think you should just teach people how to bike anywhere in Northampton. There's a way that you bike when you're in traffic, and there's a way that you bike on the rail trail. But adding these little segments of so-called protected lanes here and there that are super expensive and not safe, I don't think that's the way to go. And I think we should really stop and have a deeper conversation with people like Pedal People and others and just understand, why are you promoting something that you probably don't really think is safe and is probably not the way that you bike either? What is that about? I think we need to have a conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see who's. All right. I think it's Deb. Deb Clemmer. Yeah.
Okay.
Do your, yeah, there you go.
Deb Clemmer, Ward 2. Yeah, I just wanted to, well, first of all, I just want to thank all the directors for their thorough description of the projects. You know, it's an old, Northampton is an old city, Massachusetts is an old Commonwealth, and we need to keep on top of these repairs. If we let them go, it's going to get worse and much, much more expensive down the road. So I really appreciate them taking these small steps every year and looking ahead to see the best way to keep things safe for everybody and in good repair. The second thing, I want to just speak to something that a couple of people brought up, and it's a Picture Main Street. Once again, that money had to be used for Picture Main Street. It's not coming out of our pocket except for the replacement of the infrastructure, which we would have to do anyway. And right now, the project is getting paid for by grants by the Commonwealth. If we didn't take advantage of this and of having the street dug up, we'd have to do it on our dime, take out loans. And it needs to be done. There was a few pipe bursts already in this area, and it's really when it happens unexpectedly, it's much more expensive, and it's much more disruptive because people are without water and businesses are without water and have to shut down for whatever length of time it takes to replace the pipes. And the traffic is much more disrupted because we can't plan it. Main Street is going to be done in a planned way with sections closed down at a time, and we need to do this. And I don't know why people don't want to use money that's being given to us. It's free money given to us to do this project. And we're going to have a beautiful downtown and much safer. So, it's not, I wish people would stop saying that we should use the money for something else. We can't. Legally, we can't. It's earmarked for Main Street, and that's it. And the mayor put aside the $3.1 million of ARPA money to replace the pipes, which are over 100 years old and need to be done anyway. So, I wish people would just get the facts straight and stop talking about this false narrative that we can use the money for other things. We're going to lose it. The deadline passed. We put our plans in, and we have to use the money for Main Street, or we're going to, just lose $21 million. It doesn't make sense to me. So if anybody can explain why we should do that, I'd love to talk to them and hear them. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. I see Joanna Radding. Good evening.
Hi. I'm Johanna Radding. I live in Florence and in Ward 5. I just wanted to comment on the Northampton High School traffic redesign and the bus loop. I have heard a lot about that bus loop having been closed due to safety issues. I would love to hear how the safety issues will get addressed by opening it back up, and how the city plans to make that bus loop safe as students are exiting and entering the buses and crossing the bus loop to get to the entrance of the high school, as traffic will still back up even with this new design, and drivers will get impatient, and in the past they used to cut through it. I'm also concerned about the loss of that green space in front of the high school. Students utilize it as a hangout space. Classes meet there outside, and the high school has very small grounds as it is, and it would be a shame to remove that area that gets that kind of use. And the Milton and Riverside intersection changes, while that is an intersection that is in desperate need of changes. I drive that every day, dropping a child off at the high school. I am concerned about the closeness to Riverside, and during those peak times, it is going to back up traffic even more. And so I would just like to hear about why those designs, and have the finance committee and city council ask some of those questions and make sure that this is the right design before moving forward with it. I think there's a lot of positives in it, but I think there's also the potential for introducing a lot more problems.
Thank you, Joanna. Meg Robbins. There we go. Good evening. Oh, did I mute you again? Hold on. You've disappeared from my. That's interesting. Okay, Aston. There we go. Nope. There.
Okay. That was sort of like, I'm going to hit the button, you hit the button.
Yeah, I just got a little trigger happy there, and yeah.
Good. Meg Robbins, Ward 4, and I wasn't going to respond either, but we did just hear from Councillor Clemmer that Picture Main Street is essentially free, that the money that we're funding it with is ARPA. She cited at 22 million. It actually is 26 million that we're getting from the federal government, which I hope doesn't get clawed back. But I see in the capital plan that 2630, the only reference to the city cost to Picture Main Street is the 3.16 million for the sewer and water replacement. I am concerned about the loss of recurring revenue from downtown businesses that will be driven out of business during the construction of Picture Main Street. But my question for the council, and particularly the finance committee, is can you assure the residents of our city that we will not be liable for any further costs to the Picture Main Street project beyond the 3.16 ARPA money and beyond the $2,200,000 that we have spent prior to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. I see Benjamin and Nan. That's fine. Let me just make sure that someone who hasn't spoken. I think you are the only two hands I see. Okay. Benjamin. Okay. Can you? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Benjamin Spencer, Northampton. Just thought I'd jump back in here to mention to the person who spoke maybe two people back. There's lots of excellent information about the project in front of the high school that's available through the Department of Public Works website on the city. They have a frequently asked questions section that would answer a lot of what your questions are. That's up. It's quite excellent. There's the plan is there as well. And I would also say, just so you know, the bus loop is going to be exclusively for buses, and the parkland is not going to be touched. In fact, I think it would take an act of some sort of state act to touch that parkland, and that's partly why there's not going to be a rotary there, or rotaries couldn't be considered there, because all of that parkland, that little triangle in front of the high school, can't be touched, and Child's Park can't be touched. So don't worry about that. That's going to stay. So I was just hoping to maybe clear up some concerns for that individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Okay, Nan.
Hi, thanks for the second shot. I just want to clear something up. I heard both Benjamin Spencer and Councillor Clemmer speak to people like talking about, PMS costing us too much money, and I didn't really hear anyone saying that tonight. And what I was speaking to, in case this came across wrong, is I heard Director LaScalia at budget time. I think she was asked about the size of the pipes going into Main Street, and if they were going to be, climate resistant, and the recommended size and strength for 100 years rather than 50, something to that effect. And she said it's difficult to explain, but there's a lot going on under there, and we can't fit the best in there. And my comment wasn't about don't pay for PMS, or we have to pay. My comment was, if geothermal pipes going in there is going to stop us from putting that in, it's kind of a question I've never heard asked. If that's why it's so it might be so crowded in there, then I'm saying don't do geothermal, which isn't included in PMS. That's like, maybe there's a grant, but we have to drop a whole bunch of design money, and it's a short distance. So if that was confusing to them, my apologies. I'm talking about geothermal, not the pipes. I want the big pipes. I want them to last. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I see Director Weil. Let's see. Hi, Ben. There you go.
Hi, Ben Weil. I live in Leeds. You're my counselor. I would say that in the dim and distant past, there was some look at the possibility of adding a thermal network for downtown, but there simply wasn't enough time to get the design in, so there is no plan to do that. So I hope that puts Nan's mind at ease.
Thank you. Convenient that you were right there to answer that question. Okay. All right. I think I'm not seeing any hands. So we're going to move on to our agenda. And again, just a reminder that we'll have a second round of comment and questions after the free cash presentation. Okay, so back to our agenda. President Jarrett, are you? see.
Hello.
Hello there. Yes. So feel free to recap since I rudely divided your time. So
No worries. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't need to go over the numbers again, but generally, like capital supports operating, and both are critically important. We can't have one without the other. And when we're considering cuts to capital, we need to think, how will that affect the operations of departments? And I'm actually not hearing projects that folks would propose to cut. I'm not hearing a desire to cut capital projects except the Resilience Hub or Picture Main Street, but neither of those are in the general fund capital improvement program. And not necessarily this meeting, but generally, in terms of what I'm hearing. So yeah, if there aren't projects to cut, and we know that we have trusted professionals who have designed and estimated the costs for these projects, then that's it. It seems like we would be ready to move forward on them. So that, and I'm speaking to that in terms of the relationship to free cash, and if reallocating. So I'd love to hear from the Finance Committee any thoughts that they have on moving forward.
Yeah, try to get the finance. Oh. Sure, I can see the Finance Committee. Mm-hmm. See. Yes, I see that Councillor Moulton. Go ahead. I think. Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, I want to say to Council President Jarrett that I appreciate the continuation of what you started at a very late hour last Thursday in looking at the potential reductions of capital spending in the context of the bigger financial picture of the city. That's what we need to do, and I think that you have set forth that context very well. That it's not just looking at a single year. We have to examine and understand the financial implications, at least for the next 5 years. And the other thing I would add to the context, it's not just financial, of course. We also have to look at these projects in the context of already established goals for the city. For example, our climate goals, decarbonization, and other things like the strategic planning that was done for the school department within the last year. So there is a greater context in which to consider how we're spending the entire pot of money.
Councillor Elkins.
Hi. Thank you, Alex. Because we're in committee, I'll go with Alex. I appreciate that thoughtful explanation of your thinking, and as I understand it and agree, are the facts, the sort of reality of what we are looking at, and I agree. I mean, there can, if a consensus of, or if a requisite number of counselors want, if there's an interest in taking a different approach overall, I think that what is before us and the way to get at that, if there's a desire to do that, is to make specific recommendations about projects to not go forward with. For my part, that that gets to be this overall package of capital improvement is where it's not a static thing. This year's is a continuation the 4 years prior to us of those capital plans and project out another 4 years beyond us. So it's a moment in time. And every project that we're looking at for this year, of course, is reflects previous investments and design and planning and thought and policy goals that as they've been expressed by by this mayor and prior mayors, this council and prior councils, and of course, in future councils will be able to, and mayors will be able to weigh in as we go forward. I agree that we have we just have an obligation to maintain our infrastructure and to maintain our infrastructure and to keep pushing, important policies forward that we have all been working on, such as resilience and climate and Department of Community Care, which is not part of the budget issue tonight, but some of these other things. I also think that part of our a big part of what we have to do is not somebody spoke to, and then there's been a lot of discussion about the traffic safety project in front of the high school, and there's a lot to be said about that. I've heard from people and different ideas about what will work and what will be safe and those kinds of things. I don't think what is before us, what something like that or any of these projects in terms of the finances is to micromanage those projects in the context of this committee. And what exactly those plans are. It is a bigger picture consideration of whether or not they are projects we want to go forward with and agree to support. And so I agree with Alex and I think everything he talked about and explained and certainly he put pen to paper in terms of the math is true, and that if counselors want us to look at want the city to look at spending the money as reflected in the capital plans and these orders differently, then it's the onus is on counselors who want to do that to make specific recommendations to amend the capital plan in terms of specific projects and make their case and see how we come out as a council in terms of what we would pass as orders and pass as the SIP overall SIP resolution and what we might not. So that's where I'm at tonight. I'm happy to listen to and to hear more about people's thoughts about this and consider folks ideas about what we could spend differently. I have not come here tonight with any particular motion or idea about there is no project on the SIP that I would amend or make a motion to amend to essentially to not fund or cut. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. I have to say with the capital plan, as a city councilor for quite a while, we've heard about concerns of no minutes that is given to the people in the public. I know many people that have volunteered their time to be on capital plan. It's not easy. It didn't happen overnight, believe me. Of their thoughts, every department head had to come in and bring their concerns of what they needed for their departments. I do have concerns. It's an advisory committee. That minutes probably should be brought forth. That's a change that I would like to see. Right now, I am saying as a city councilor, I really feel terrible of the conditions that our schools are in. And I remember once before, mostly the whole city council agreed. Bill Sullivan, Bill Joy, a whole bunch of us. of making sure we try to fund to the best that we could. It was not easy. And if I recall with our mayor, David Darkowitz, I had to make the hardest decision of taking away on some of the issues that we're going to be looking at tonight, which was during the beginning of the COVID in our city. And believe me, I took this very, very seriously. The police cruisers were a big, big subject with me, especially with businesses that were really to the point of hurting very, very badly. And I brought it up at City Council of how I felt that at that time, a 5-year plan and the cruisers was not in a good spirit for me as a city councilor. When I had residents on my ward, and I'm just trying to explain something here, who were having problems financially, losing their jobs, I had to make a decision, and the mayor, David Narkowitz, was excellent. I said I could not agree of supporting the amount of cars that they needed, cruisers. And he called me at home the next day and he said, Councilor, I know where you're coming at. I said, I'm taking this at heart. I said, I have people on my ward with families. One has lost their job. Businesses are hurting. I had to make that decision, Mayor, and that's it. He said, what if I drop it down to 2? I said, I cannot give in, period. Things are changing now, changing in our city. We're trying to get our businesses back to the positions that they should be in. They're not in there yet. They're trying hard. I see people a little bit more on Main Street, concerns of the redesign of Main Street being brought up a lot now, a lot. My main concern is I am looking at this capital plan, knowing all the time that is spent with volunteers and professional staff, especially our department heads, who say exactly what they need, why they need it. This advisory committee doesn't just say, okay, you got it. There's a lot of thinking going on here. So tonight with our capital plans, there's a lot of thought that has been brought in to all these capital plans. It did not, again, happen overnight. So I just wanted to give my feelings about that as a city councilor. I just wish that, and I'm happy about Smith College giving the $500,000, but I think they could have given more. Being an educational college here in our city, of why they could not donate more to get our schools the education that they should have here and help us with more money. It's very difficult here when we have the University of Mass in that helping out other areas in Amherst. And I just wish that we could get more people coming forth to help our city bring our education back to the level where it should be. So I don't know which way to go. I don't know if school committee, city councilors, all elected officials, everybody get together and do some huge fundraising here to get us out of this mess. I mean, look at the hot chocolate run. Look at the money that they produce there. Councilor Maori, you were in it. I was in it. It's unbelievable. I just think we all need to work together and get that level back, get it back to where it should be. And I think with the Chapter 70 funding, we've got Lindsay Sabadosa, our state rep. We have our Senator Joe Comfort, everybody, all of us signing papers to please change that formula. So right now, I am in full support of education for our schools. My kids graduated from Northampton High and continued on to college. We're in a terrible, terrible situation. And I'm hoping we all can get together and find a way here, working together to get the money to make that formula correct here so that we can get those positions back at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Jarrett, President Jarrett.
Yeah, I had a thought to add to the discussion which is if we acknowledge there is harm by the cuts to the schools from level services, which I acknowledge, then we need to weigh relative harms. And cutting capital projects would result in harm in different ways. So if the argument can be made that cutting the amount that we have for capital permanently and allocating that for schools would result in a lesser harm, I think that's worth discussing.
Yeah, I'm going to interject and say that was something I was thinking about. First of all, I appreciate, and I think I said this in the last council meeting, I really appreciate you kind of sticking your neck out and really sitting down and proactively looking at numbers. I hope that moving forward that the council will be open to other alternative projections about how to sufficiently fund our schools, because I think we need to really look at them. Yeah. All ideas. And so thank you for that. And yeah, that's what I was thinking about the equation. Councilor Jarrett, is just if you cut an operational budget, it kind of, it can kind of perhaps float for a while, but what happens after a while is it starts to crumble. That's right. The operational part of it starts to crumble, and what happens is it starts being more expensive to fix. Yeah. So that is a hard thing, like in your equation, to kind of quantify that. It's not, what I mean? It's not just the numbers that about funding. It's what happens if we don't fund. I'm just saying, barring, I'm not even talking about the ethics and the stress but just, chronic kind of insufficient funding of operation in the city actually is quite expensive over time. So I don't have an answer about how you kind of quantify that, but I think it is part of your equation. Yeah, and I guess, we'll talk about the orders and just to add that even in this conversation we're having, it is difficult because I think we're trying to hold, the operational budget and the SIP at the same time, and yet the SIP is coming to us first. And they are interconnected. So I'm finding, and we don't really have a deadline until, to approve the SIP until June 1st. Right. So I'm very interested, and I know I've talked to the Director Lascalia about, there's things that are really time sensitive, and I'm happy to hear about that and prioritize those. But I would say it would be I think it would be best to consider all of these, at least after we've had the first projection look, the ones that aren't, going to, aren't so time sensitive, because I don't know why we are doing them early if we don't have to have them approved till June, because I think that might be part of the disconnect. And actually what you're saying, Councilor Jarrett, you're kind of bringing them both together. And maybe that's what I really liked about, your thought process is like, let's hold them both in our head at the same time. So I would encourage this council to do that as much as possible in this budget season. And yeah, that's all I have for now. Councilor Moulton and then Councilor Elkins.
So to follow up on those comments, Councilor Maori, I'd like to have the mayor again address. We are seeing the SIP about 2 months earlier this year than last. Yeah. About why that is, and any more specifics. We heard Director Lascalia on Thursday say that she would like to get DPW projects bid during February. That's the specific deadline that I heard. But also asked the mayor and a lot of other department heads are here tonight about other time-sensitive issues that would require action earlier than it has been in the past on the SIP.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I very much want to hear that. Councilor Elkins, did you have?
It was in the vein of what Councilor Moulton just asked. Is I wanted to, is there were some specific reasons why Director Lascalia in particular suggested some of her projects are time sensitive. I want to also, I do also have to say, as a general, it is. I do hold them both. I mean, I can't speak for any other counselor, but you know, in my review of the SIP, it does very carefully lay out the sources of the funding. I understand the free cash certification process and where we ended up this year and how we ended up. I understand. I certainly understand the suggested allotment by the mayor, and what I personally am prepared to vote for and am supportive of. To speak to Councilor Jarrett's point of weighing of the relative harms, that is to some degree a more project by project, I think, consideration, a policy consideration of we're just going to do X much percentage more or less from capital and do it this way still leaves us weighing the particular projects that we have in front of us. So it really is the case that delaying even those that are not identified specifically as time sensitive and affecting bidding, is that especially in this era of inflation, but also in just any number of other ways, there are all kinds of knock-on costs and inefficiencies that are caused by the delay. So I, do my homework to understand the overall, project and the budget footprint of the SIP portion of it, the capital portion of it, and provided I support the projects. And especially if we're going to get to the end of that process and nobody's going to be putting forward motions to cut any particular projects, I think delay costs money. I also think some of these projects, for instance, the laptops and the, for the schools and some of these other issues, we're ready to go on those things. Let's get that technology in our kids' hands. And let's get going on these things. So I'm a little I want to push back a little bit on the suggestion that those of us who are here and doing our jobs and aren't holding all of these things in the big picture in mind and know the whole path that's laid out in front of us in terms of the budget season and the overall thing. We can and do both.
Yeah, Councilor Jarrett.
Thank you, Rachel. I do like the first names.
Alex.
So just remind us that there are two areas that we are, and which are interconnected. We have the resolution that establishes the 5-year plan and our endorsement of that 5-year plan. And then we have all the orders before us, which are just for this coming fiscal year, though certainly it's in the plan that, some of them are done over multiple years. They're not all in this year. And so once we start the process of this year, we really should continue them and endorse them. But just that, the most time sensitive is the orders that are before us, and acknowledging the general plan. But the out years, those change every year, and if we want to take more time to discuss those out years, that's certainly something to think about.
Yeah, I'll just add that, I mean, at any time, a financial order can come to us. That's not contingent on kind of where we are with the capital improvement plan. So I think and it's a plan, meaning it should be planful, and we do have till June 1st. So I just don't want expediency, that's sometimes put out there as a reason to kind of, kind of rush something when it's not, if there's a urgent need, a financial order can come to us the next meeting. That's not really, but I just think holding the entire budget, as Alex says, it's interconnected. So yeah, I think, yeah. Do any other counselors have comments? I want to take a 5-minute break before we go into the orders, but I want to make sure. Oh, there you are, Marianne. Anyone have anything they want to say while we have Alex with us on this subject before we take a 5-minute break and come back and look at the 14 financial orders?
At what time?
Yeah, so 5 minutes. Yeah, I just want to grab some water. So let's just say 7:20.
Okay.
Well, yeah, 7:21, I guess. 7:21.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. What's that terrible noise? Okay. Okay.
I'm just wondering if it would make sense to do the presentation now because one, the SIP is, I mean, the free cash is being talked about freely. And also one of the orders that you're about to go through is a free cash order.
Right. Let me just think. That would be fine with me. Just members of the public. I had said that we were going to have a second round of a shorter round of question and comments after the free cash presentation. So let me just think about. I guess we would do that. Yes, I guess we could. You could do that. The presentation. We could have the round of question comments and then do the SIP orders.
I mean, there was only one order on the agenda after the presentation.
That's right. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So, but you're saying before we do look at the 14 financial orders. That
it's obviously up to you, whatever you think.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand.
It might be
plug it in.
helpful.
Okay. Yes, that's fine. So let me just. So then we will. We'll still have our question, and we'll do our question and comments, I guess, after following the free cash discussion. I mean, presentation.
Okay.
We are recording. Okay, so we are back, and we're going to, I believe, hear from Director Nardi about our free cash, and then we are going to look at some the free cash and the SIP orders. We're going to have pause and do our public comment period after the presentation and after the committee members have asked some questions and discussed it. We'll do public comment and then we will go through our orders, just to be really clear. Okay, welcome. Hi.
Hi. So I actually have sort of a presentation, or I have remarks before, and then Director Nardi has slides.
Okay.
Illustrate. Okay.
And Laura, are you able to share those slides, or is Director Nardi a co-host? Oh, you're muted.
She's a co-host.
Okay, great. Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Happy to be with you. So the public discussion around the Northampton budget and the school budget in particular has been, I would say, very robust this year, but also very intense. And while it's been a really trying experience for all involved, it's also quite heartening, I think, to see so many people deeply engaged in digging into the budget and seeking creative solutions. Some of you counselors will remember all the times that we begged people to come to meetings and pay attention and understand what these processes are that we go through. So, Northampton is really at its best when we come together and collaborate to tackle these tough challenges. And where collaboration tends to fall apart, though, is when people can't agree on facts. And when it comes to budgets, if we don't have a shared understanding of the numbers, collaboration itself is really an enormous challenge. So underneath, I think, a lot of this heated rhetoric that we've had, what I've seen in the past several months is actually a lot of agreement on core principles. We all want to invest in public schools as much as possible, and we all know that any new recurring expenses need to be sustained with identified revenue sources. The disagreements largely center on how the city government practices fiscal management, and then in turn, what revenue sources are available to cover those recurring expenses. So is the city properly following the best fiscal management practices as articulated by the state's budget experts by using portions of the year-end budget surpluses to maintain critical stabilization funds? Or does the city have an excess of stabilization funds, an excess that could be tapped to support additional hiring at our public schools, excuse me, as well as various other proposed projects? Can any new recurring expenses be sustained with a different budgeting approach, which assumes more upfront revenue and which produces less of a year-end surplus? So at the last December council meeting, so the meeting or the last meeting in December for the council, I announced the numbers from the state's free cash certification. On the January 2nd agenda were the orders I proposed to distribute some of those funds. 2 of those orders were referred to this meeting and are on this agenda. The orders require 2/3 approval of the council, but since the rationale for these orders is linked to the city's overall fiscal management practices, before discussing the orders, I'd just like to clear up what I believe is a big misconception about the state of our stabilization funds. So an argument has been circulated online and on social media that the city of Northampton has an excess of money in stabilization funds based on data from a table that's provided by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, DOR, and their Division of Local Services, which is titled, that table is titled Stabilization and Special Purpose Stabilization Funds as Percent of Total Budget. So this table ostensibly allows people to compare the amounts that each Massachusetts municipality has in stabilization funds relative to the size of their operating budget. So for fiscal year 23, which is the last year the DOR has all the data for almost all of the 351 municipalities, right? Northampton had about $34 million in stabilization funds, amounting to 25.91% of the operating budget as defined by the state in that table. That percentage ranked Northampton 22nd out of 351 municipalities, and most of the higher ranked ones were very lightly populated smaller communities with tiny budgets like Cummington. For most municipalities, that percentage doesn't hit 20%. So I can certainly understand why when people came across this table, they thought, whoa, why is this so high in Northampton? But there's some very important information that's not included or explained in this DOR table, which wouldn't be obvious to anyone at their just sort of glancing at the table. So, the council president touched on some of this before. First, nearly half of that 34 million in stabilization funds for FY23, which was just under 16 million, came from our 4 enterprise stabilization funds. So that's water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. Second, enterprise funds are funded by the utility fees that we all pay. So similar to how some of our unspent general fund money is used to maintain our other stabilization funds, unspent enterprise funds from our utility fees are used to maintain our enterprise stabilization funds. Third, enterprise funds, as Council President said, are closed systems. Money in enterprise funds and also in enterprise stabilization funds cannot be used for other purposes, not for schools, not for roads, not for sidewalks, not for something that's not, doesn't fit within that enterprise. And fourth, and this is really important, many municipalities do not have any enterprise stabilization funds. They may have some enterprise funds, but they do not necessarily have enterprise stabilization funds. So if you're comparing the total amount in Northampton stabilization funds, including what's in the enterprise stabilization funds, to a municipality that doesn't even have enterprise stabilization funds, then you're not making an apples to apples comparison, but that chart doesn't separate these out. So if you remove Northampton's enterprise stabilization funds from the equation in FY23, our general fund stabilizations are 13.87% of the prior year's budget, not 25.92% of the prior year's budget. For example, Amherst and East Hampton do not have enterprise stabilization funds. So looking at the FY24 data that DOR just published, so not the 23, this is 24, we have it for Northampton. The Northampton figure is 27.33%. However, if you remove the enterprise stabilization funds from the data, the actual percentage is 14.74%. Then when you compare the FY24 data with Amherst and East Hampton, that's in the DOR chart and some that was reported to us by the communities directly, Amherst comes in at 17.99%. and East Hampton at 15.25%. And Northampton is, again, as I said, 14.74%. So that would be an apples to apples comparison of stabilization accounts. As we talked about with the capital improvement program, we have some major enterprise capital projects that are in process or are being planned for. And that is one of the reasons why we have robust stabilization accounts. So I give sort of all of this background to kind of shed some more light on that fiscal foundation. And I hope ease some of the concerns, because I've heard a lot of people sort of talk about how crazy it is that we have all of this in these stabilization accounts. But if you compare us, as I said, in equal ways with other communities, we do not have more than we probably have more than some communities. We have less than other communities. If you use those two comparison communities, we have a little bit less than they do. So I'd also like to make a couple more observations about our stabilization funds and our overall fiscal stability plan. The primary reason to have stabilization funds is to help keep budgets stable when costs unexpectedly rise or revenues unexpectedly dip. By putting some money in stabilization fund accounts, we earn extra interest, stretching our dollars farther. And just as you might keep an interest-bearing account, savings account alongside your primary checking account. Because fiscal turbulence happens far more often than we would like, stabilization funds are not locked away, never to see the light of day. We tap them very regularly. For example, the General Stabilization Fund provides one-time money for emergency situations. In March, we used General Stabilization Funds to begin the urgent repairs on Memorial Hall. Tonight, we're speaking about using $1.15 million from General Stabilization proposed for road improvements and resurfacing in the capital improvement program. So the financial orders actually introduced at the council meeting last week, and the orders drawing from them, in addition, a draw from all of our stabilization accounts. In addition to general stabilization, climate stabilization, of course, capital, and also fiscal stability stabilization. So we do use them. You have orders before you right now that use them. The state's budget experts recommend that the amount of money kept in general stabilization should amount to about 5 to 7% of the city's operating budget. By fiscal year 2022, Northampton had built up the General Stabilization Fund to $6.3 million, which was 5.56% of the operating budget. 2 years later, we drew down on the fund by about $600,000, and our operating budget increased. Currently, the General Stabilization Fund is at 4.42% of the operating budget, slightly below the state recommendation. This is further evidence that we don't overdoing it in terms of savings. Like most stabilization funds, our General Stabilization Fund is not designed to address rising operating costs. However, unlike many communities, we do have one stabilization fund that is designed for that purpose, and that's the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. Created in 2013 with the passage of that year's property tax override, the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund is the linchpin of the fiscal stability plan. This plan began as a way to manage budget pressures caused by the state's Prop 2.5 cap. So again, quickly, Prop 2.5 puts a 2.5% cap on the municipality's annual property tax levy increase unless voters approve an override of that cap in a referendum. So since the cap is smaller than the average rate of inflation, cities are effectively pressured to cut services unless voters pass periodic overrides. The Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund helps support rising costs between overrides, helping to avoid excessively frequent overrides and promote thoughtful long-range budgeting. In between overrides, the fund is maintained by a portion of free cash. Once the fund is drawn down to a certain level, we call for the next override, which, if approved, fully replenishes that fund. In the current and prior fiscal years, we have been heavily relying on the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund to support the Northampton Public Schools, transferring $3.2 million over the 2-year period. And since we were able to keep the fund afloat with an unexpected increase in the FY24 fourth quarter revenues, we postponed a previously scheduled override, and we expect to rely on the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund again this next coming fiscal year. The general rule about stabilization fund transfers is that they are one-time monies, not to be used for recurring expenses. But again, the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund is a little different because it is effectively tied to a plan of periodic overrides. We use it to temporarily support recurring expenses in the operating budget, knowing that we will need the passage of an override to maintain those expenses in future years. Since the fiscal stability plan's been in place, Northampton has built up its stabilization funds from next to nothing, not only with the passage of the 2013 and 2020 overrides, but also with fiscally responsible revenue estimates and a rebounding economy following the 2008-2009 Great Recession and rebounding revenues following the pandemic. Over these last 11 years, annual school funding increases from the city's general fund have been stronger and steadier, never dropping below 3%, whereas in the prior decade before the fiscal stability plan, the 3% threshold was crossed only twice. In the past 20 years, the biggest year-to-year increases in the city's total direct contribution to schools was last year's 7.4% increase, and this year's now 8.99% increase, in part because of those transfers from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. Another factor is the new Special Ed Stabilization Fund, which was seeded this year with a portion of last year's free cash. It has been already tapped as recently as last month. Also, over the last 11 years, actual net school spending has increased significantly. We can best assess how much school districts spend beyond the minimum amount set by the state with data provided by the state Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, called actual net school spending as a percent of the foundation budget. Actual net school spending goes beyond the city's direct contribution to the Northampton Public Schools and encompasses direct and indirect spending from all sources. And the foundation budget is how much the state determines is the minimum amount that a school district should spend. In fiscal year 2013, Northampton spent 116% of the minimum. In fiscal year 2024, it was 133%. While that is not the highest for school districts in our area, it's higher than many, including Belchertown, Chicopee, East Hampton, Granby, Greenfield, Holyoke, Springfield, South Hadley, West Springfield, and Westfield. For FY25, we do not have the percent over required net school spending for other communities, but we can calculate for ourselves. And in Northampton, required net school spending increased by 3%. And with the 8.99% increase for MPS in FY25, we can estimate that our percent over required was an additional 5% increase over that to 138%. So 138% over required net school spending. And this part is very important. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at everyone, but we have significantly increased school funding over the past several years, despite Chapter 70 aid to Northampton continuing to decline. So back in fiscal year 2003, we're kicking it way back, the state covered 1/3 of the actual school tab. In fiscal year 2013, so 10 years after that, it was down to 23% that net school spending was covering. It's now 17%. So all of those districts that I just named a few moments ago, with lower amounts of actual net school spending, as well as many of the districts with higher amounts of actual net school spending over Northampton, have larger shares of that spending covered by the state Chapter 78 than Northampton. A few examples: Amherst Pelham Regional is 169% over required net school spending, but 32% of that is covered by Chapter 70. Agawam is 130% over, but 36% is covered by Chapter 70. Ludlow's 137, but 32 is covered by Chapter 70. And East Longmeadow is 135, but 33% is covered by Chapter 70. So again, ours is 17%. So we're at 138 over, but only 17%. You know, half or a little bit less than half of those other communities that I just mentioned is covered by Chapter 70. So that much more of theirs is covered by state aid. The fiscal stability plan cannot solve all of the fiscal challenges facing our education systems. It is designed to stabilize finances, support long-range budgeting, and help pass periodic overrides to keep up with the rising costs. But it can't shake loose more money from state or
federal sources. It can't stop how charter schools siphon away from district public schools. It can't end Prop 2.5. But it absolutely has helped us manage our limited resources better and stretch our dollars farther. Of course, we have to always note that the fiscal stability plan only works if voters agree to keep the plan going by passing overrides when necessary. Voters, of course, always have the right to abandon the plan, but it would be really awful for the schools and for every other essential city department if the next override failed and the fiscal stability plan ceased because we told ourselves inaccurate information about our fiscal situation. We didn't connect how sound management of free cash and stabilization funds have benefited our schools. And if we convinced ourselves that overrides were no longer necessary to maintain our current levels of service. So this brings me to the immediate task at hand and one of the things we're talking about tonight, which are the financial orders distributing this year's free cash. So free cash is generated at the end of the fiscal year when we take in more revenue or spend less than budgeted. The state makes a certification of the exact amount of free cash, which we can spend on any legal purpose. The certification encompasses not only that year's budget surplus, but also unspent money in the last year's free cash account. So in fiscal year 2024, we generated a budget surplus of $6.83 million. The $6.83 million newly generated free cash in FY24 was 5.85% of the fiscal year 2024's general fund budget of $116.7 million. According to the state's best practices as of January 2025, under sound financial policies, a community strives to generate free cash in an equal amount to in an amount equal to 5 to 7% of its annual budget. As we've talked about before, an unusual factor that increased the 6.83 million surplus is an historically high amount of investment income. So that came out to 2.4 million this year. Before FY23, the 5-year annual average for our interest or investment income was about $200,000. So then in 23, the city's treasurer astutely moved money into an investment vehicle tied to an increase in interest rates. With interest rates starting to come down now, similar amounts in future years just can't be presumed. And this is one of the things that exemplifies the volatile nature of free cash and why it's considered one-time funds. We also carried over 1.68 million in unspent funds still in the free cash account from the previous year, and 3.15 million Federal American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds as lost revenue. These ARPA funds were taken as lost revenue in FY22 and have been part of free cash since fiscal year 23. That's why the total certification amounted to 11.66 million. We have previously discussed the plan to use ARPA money to fund underground infrastructure upgrades needed for Main Street. This has been discussed with councilors, was stated in the FY25 budget message, was in the May 15th, 24 stabilization funds and undesignated fund balances FAQ, and is also in the picture Main Street FAQ. As the project continues to move forward on the tip and construction is anticipated in 2026, the city needs to prepare funding for utility work we are taking the opportunity to address. Within the financial order titled "In order to appropriate $7.4 million in free cash to various capital projects," there is included an appropriation of that $3.15 million in ARPA funds for the Main Street corridor utility infrastructure. When you remove those ARPA funds from the equation, that leaves $8.51 million of locally generated free cash. According to the state's best practices for free cash, quote, as a non-recurring revenue source, free cash should be restricted to paying one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or replenishing other reserves, end quote. And the state further recommends to, quote, keep a targeted year-end unappropriated free cash balance to fund the next certification, end quote. Northampton's longstanding free cash policy follows that guidance, dividing free cash into 3 parts. 1/3 is divided and transferred into 4 special purpose stabilization funds. 1/3 is directed towards the next year's capital improvement program, and the remaining 1/3 stays in the account to help address any emergencies, unforeseen needs during the year. So in turn, the next one of the next financial orders on the agenda, or the one towards the end of the agenda, is for $2.8 million of free cash evenly divided between the general, capital, fiscal stability, and climate stabilization funds. As was discussed, another $4.24 million of locally generated free cash is proposed to be invested in capital projects in the capital improvement program, and listed in the financial order titled, quote, in order to appropriate $7.4 million free cash in various capital projects, which again includes that $3.15 million in ARPA for the Main Street underground infrastructure. About 61% of that $4.24 million in locally generated free cash, upon your approval, will go to capital projects involving the two school districts, Northampton Public Schools and Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School. The biggest of these projects is the Northampton High School Road Safety Project, for which $1.6 million in free cash will support it. Director Lascalia spoke about this project last Thursday, and some of the other projects in this order are $425,000 for information technology needs for MPS, $535,000 will cover various capital needs for Smith Voc, and that includes air conditioning and ventilation. We heard in public comment last week a request to use $2 million in free cash to fund 20 hires in the Northampton Public Schools, reversing the reductions from this current fiscal year that we're in. But hiring is a recurring expense, an expense that will cost more than $2 million in subsequent years, as Councilor Jarrett was talking about. And that cannot be done responsibly without identified recurring revenue. Not only would rerouting $2 million mean scrapping some of these critical capital projects, but it would not provide secure employment for anyone we hired, because we would be repeating the same pattern that led to the last 2 fiscal years' budget shortfalls and staff reductions. Promising to cover this cost with more aggressive budget estimates to produce less free cash fails to take into account that we have already adopted more aggressive budget estimates. In fact, savings from unspent budget lines in this free cash certification equaled only 1% of the FY24 general fund budget, while the 10-year average is 2.14%. So we had far less surplus from budget this year than the previous 10 years. We cannot know exactly how our more aggressive estimates for the FY25 budget are going to pan out, but how well they do will affect our FY26 budget in May and our FY23 free cash certification towards the end of this calendar year. How revenues and expenditures track over the next several months will inform the FY26 budget. And it is at that point when we can assess what recurring revenues are available for any new positions in the next fiscal year. Recurring revenue needs to be identified before positions are created, not the other way around. I remain deeply committed to continued collaboration about how we can better financially support and allocate our resources to our public schools and to all of our services in a fiscally sound and sustainable manner. There is clearly plenty of work to do on that front, and even though we can't solve every problem overnight with the limited resources we have, I know that we can make things better if we do work together and we work with the same set of facts. So I thank you for letting me go through all of that. And the Finance Committee, I urge you to support these financial orders. And I will hand it over to Director Nardi. Who might not be a co-host, I'm not sure.
Hi, sorry about that. I just lost you. All right, I'm gonna bring you back up. I am going to share my screen. Just give me a second. Okay. Sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, can everybody see that? You see the screen?
I can see it.
Yes.
And it's the
Free cash.
it's the full slideshow, right? Your screen is filled with it.
It's not. It's got it on the side too. So I think you have to click slideshow.
I am sharing the wrong screen. Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. So just to really quickly go back over what the mayor went over. So the generation of free cash, it's generated from three sources: funds remaining from unspent from the prior year's fund, revenues that come in above projections, and unspent amounts in departmental budgets. This balance is also offset by any deficits the city may have, such as uncollected funds from grant reimbursements or Chapter 90 or liabilities that the city has. Unspent funds from FY 2024, we've talked about this. It was 4.8 million not spent in FY 2024. That represents 41.46% of the total certified free cash. So we brought forward $4.8 million. That's not new money. I heard somebody mention that today and last week. So of that 4.8 million, we've talked about this, 3.15 million from the 10 million is from the $10 million of the ARPA lost revenue that was taken in FY 2022. That was an eligible use. The council voted to accept the ARPA funds based on the Treasury's guidelines on December 16, 2021. And we noted that this was going to be one of the uses. So it has shown up in free cash since FY 2023. Of that 4.8 million was also $1.68 million remaining from regular free cash. And we brought that forward. So the targeted uses of the unspent money, as indicated by the mayor, it was in her free cash statement on December 17th. It was written in the facts on stabilizations, May 15th, 2024, and also in the FY 25 budget. We have been planning to use these funds for the construction of the underground infrastructure upgrades on Main Street, and this is talking about the ARPA lost revenue and road safety improvements at the Northampton High School. On January 19, 2023, the council unanimously voted to appropriate $500,000 from free cash for design of the Northampton High School road safety improvements. At that time, there was a detailed discussion in council as well as the TPC meeting attended by most councilors preceding the vote. During that presentation in March, the mayor discussed that the council had already appropriated the funds for the design for the project on that capital plan and reiterated that there would be significantly more funding needed for the next stages of the project, likely to be at least $3 million. The revenues. So the other piece is the FY 24 revenues generated equal 47.59% of the total certified free cash. Broken down, the revenues excluding the high interest on investments represents 26.72% of the total certified free cash. And then the high interest on investment represents 20.87%. So of the amount of money that the revenues generated, 20% of all the revenues was from that investment interest. So I just want to note that that's something new that happens in 23 and 24. Before this time, the 5-year average was $202,000. And 30 years before that, for the 30 years, it was like 300,000 was the average. So again, this is new, the high interest on investments just these last 2 years. So interest on investments, just to really quickly go over this, we talked about this in the summer. In FY 23, in an effort to take advantage of the increased rates, the treasurer identified a high interest banking vehicle for municipal and commercial entities. It provides 90% of the secured overnight financial rate, which had resulted in an average rate at the time between 4.8 and 4.9% in FY 2024. That obviously resulted in a substantial increase in the revenue of this budget line, of the investment budget line. And then, as I noted before, the prior 5-year average was 202, and we have not relied on that. And I also am very cautious because it's a very volatile line because of the interest rate. The Federal Reserve dropped interest rates 3 times since September for a total of a 1% cut, with more expected in 2025. In fact, the SOFR account rate has already dropped from the 4.92% in the spring to 3.94%. So we are already seeing a drop in that interest rate in that line on the interest. So here's just a graphic to give you an idea. This is the investment income since 2005 through 24. And the purple here that you see, that's just the ARPA funds. And again, still a significant increase in 2023 and 24 because of that SOFR account, but you still have to acknowledge that a big piece of that is also the ARPA funds as well. The third piece is the turnbacks from PS and OM, and as the mayor mentioned, we got $1.2 million or 1.09% of the FY24 general fund budget. That's 117 budget lines. The 10-year average is 2.14%, so we are lower than that this year. And again, there's been a lot of talk about municipalities and their reserves. And since the pandemic, municipalities across the nation have experienced higher than usual free cash balances. It's not just Northampton, and there are several reasons for that. We've talked about them, and just to reiterate, unprecedented release of federal funds. That's the big one. With the Coronavirus Relief Fund Act, the CARES funding that we received, schools received it, cities received it. Federal Emergency Management Agency funding, FEMA funding, we received that as well. And the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding, all of that contributed. The other factors are reduced spending because of the pandemic in 2021, the spring of 2020, folks buckled down and, communities did not spend like they were. We began very cautious budgeting estimates for fiscal years. There was loss in workforce, particularly the DPWs of municipalities, resulting in turnbacks from vacancies. And then we did see, as we were still cautiously budgeting our revenues, we saw them start to rebound in FY 2023. So all of these things contributed to not only Northampton's, but other municipalities' free cash. So this is a graphic for certified free cash from 2015 to 2025. It again shows you free cash that does not include ARPA. The brown in this case is the ARPA fund. So you see this large amount come in FY 2023. This is the $10 million that the city took for lost revenue. That the process is, that's the normal process. That's the way it's to be done, is be taken and it ends up in the municipality's free cash. We spent some of that, and in FY 24, we carried over some from FY 23 to 24, and we continued to carry over some to FY 25. So I wanted to show you the free cash, the new funds, the carryover, and the ARPA, because I think we've been talking about a lot of different numbers, and I was hopeful that maybe a graphic will help explain this. This is from 2005 to 2025. And when we look at this, 2020 was from cannabis. That's when the city started taking in cannabis funding. So you see an increase there. But this purple right here is the money, the funds that were carried over. And then again, the reddish is the ARPA. So you can see, unlike years before, we have been carrying over funds, especially since the pandemic. We had not been spending as much funding because, again, cities were making sure that they had enough funds because we didn't know what was going to happen or what things were going to look like. So another graphic, shorter time frame, just 10 years, 2015 to 2025, and this is with free cash without ARPA. So you can see the trend of free cash without ARPA. And again, we've noted it is just about $8 million. Free cash without the carryover, just new funds. So we carry over funds. So again, this is the graphic when you're not carrying over new funds and you don't have ARPA in there. The revenue uses. So The reason cautious budgeting of revenue projections ensures that we don't exceed our budget estimates. And it also makes sure we leave enough revenue to absorb increases in expenses in future years. Not only do they help fund our reserves, but all of these revenues are covering reoccurring expenses that are going to grow in out years. So we have to make sure there's enough buffer there so that when expenses are increasing, we have enough to cover that next year in the growth of the revenue. And we all know it seems like our costs are exceeding what we bring in. So the job of the city is to make sure that we have enough, that it's sustainable for future years. If you tap it all out today, there's nothing for tomorrow's increases. There's no way to grow anything. There's no way to adjust or to react to any emergencies if you don't have that. So DOR, DLS, all recommend that you make sure you're doing that in a responsibly and cautious, fiscally responsible way. Because you need your reserves. You need them to make sure that you can grow in the future and that also you have some for emergencies. As the mayor spoke about, unexpected expenses happen. And we have the general stabilization. We have for capital projects, we have capital and climate mitigation. And we have the MPS special educational stabilization to help with those special educational needs and expenses at the schools. So generally, reserves should not be used for ongoing yearly expenses, operational budget. It should not be used except in a planned manner, which is the purpose, as the mayor mentioned, of the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. The transfer of funds from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund supports the operational budget in a planned manner between overrides. As revenue projections are pushed more so that we can roll in the money that we're using out of the fiscal stability plan, the more we increase those and the more we push those to support that budget, there will be less free cash generated to support reserves. So again, by pushing both revenue projections and using reserves for operational needs, which has been indicated by the connection of the SIP to the operational budget, you will eventually have a significant deficit. You cannot do both. What the mayor is doing and what we have proposed to do is we have supported the operational budget with $2 million, and we need to roll in that $2 million with recurring revenue. And that is done by the fiscal stability plan and using our reserves in a planned manner, making sure that we have enough going forward in the out years so that we can continue to provide increases is the goal. I hear a lot that the SIP is being connected to the operational budget, and while they have a connection, they are not strictly connected. What is not funded in the SIP is not going to change what we can afford with the operational budget. I just want to make that clear. That connection to me is a false construct. Doing one does not change the other, although they are interconnected with what we generate. What we do with the capital improvement program is not going to change what is affordable with the operating budget. The city of Northampton uses its revenue for ongoing operations and its reserves for one-time expenses. So the fiscal stability funding and uses, this is just a chart that shows since its creation, the money that came in, dollars that came in, $7.3 million, and dollars that went out. So these are the dollars in FY 2019 that were used for the budget. And so as you can see, we've used $4.7 million for the budget since 2014. Most recently, we've used the $3.2 million, excuse me, for the last 2 years' budgets to support the schools. And again, this is the same information just in a graphic to show money coming in and money going out. And these are the most current 2 years that we've used fiscal stability funding. And again, the mayor talked about the DLS, or the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services chart that has been talked about a lot. This is the chart that's actually been been talked about. And as you can see, the city of Northampton, 2020 to 2024, the total stabilization percent of budget. And the one that has been talked about was 2023, which was the most recent with everybody's information on there, was 25.91%. Special purpose stabilization, 21.24%, and stabilization as 4.67. As the mayor indicated, there's some misconceptions or not misconceptions. There's some things that aren't very clear if you just look at that graph. So as the mayor talked about, the details of this chart are from each community's Schedule A information. Prior to FY 2023, all stabilization balances were combined into one total by DOR. In FY 23, the DOR started distinguishing a general stabilization from all special purpose stabilization funds. The city currently has one general stabilization fund and 8 special purpose stabilization fund accounts with money in them. The general stabilization fund totals $5.67 million in FY 2024. The special purpose stabilization accounts are established and voted for specific purposes. The city of Northampton has had up to 10 special purpose stabilization funds over the years. The cannabis stabilization and the opioid stabilization accounts no longer have any money in them. Of the remaining 8 special purpose stabilization accounts, 4 are funded by general funds. These are the things that the mayor talked about, are funded with the reserve free cash or from the free cash from the general fund budget. And the other 4 are the enterprise stabilization funds. The 4 general stabilization funds, the 4 general stabilization accounts are the capital, fiscal stability, climate mitigation, and the Northampton Public Schools Special Education Stabilization Funds. These total $13.66 million in FY 2024. The 4 enterprise stabilization funds, as the mayor mentioned, were water, sewer, solid waste, and stormwater, and these total $16.52 million in FY 2024. As the mayor said, not all city and towns have enterprise systems, and even if they do have enterprise systems, they may not have reserves or stabilization accounts. The operating budget also listed in the DOR account includes the operating budget listed in the budget booklet, and all votes from free cash, all from our general fund stabilization funds, all our votes from gifts, and all the other general fund appropriations for the capital improvement program. What that operating budget does not include is the enterprise funds. So it is not appropriate to compare the enterprise fund stabilization reserves to a budget that doesn't include the costs of those enterprise funds. So again, the mayor talked about this, but I have a graphic that shows you if you take them out for the city of Northampton, this is the same graphic, but I have taken out all the enterprise funds. Those amounts are here. We are at 14.74% of our operating budget, which is a big difference. So that graphic, if you just pull another community, you just don't know what you're comparing. And then I just have graphics. I spoke with Amherst and East Hampton, both with their finance directors, and asked them about their general stabilization fund and their other special purpose stabilization funds. The town of Amherst has a total of $18.1 million. Their general stabilization is $9.98 million. Again, that's compared to ours at 5.67 million. They have 2 special stabilization funds, capital stabilization, 7.69 million, and they have a reparations stabilization at 484,000. They do not have any enterprise stabilization funds. City of East Hampton totals $9.17 million total in all of their stabilization funds. Their general stabilization sits at 5.02 million. Their special stabilizations funds are capital stabilizations with 4.06 million, and their tax rate stabilization at 85,000. Again, they have no enterprise stabilization funds. Not to be confused with the fact that they do have enterprise funds, they just don't have any stabilization accounts, which is what that graphic shows. And again, that's just compared to our information on the right. And again, this is just that same graphic, including Amherst and East Hampton. And again, you can see Amherst Only general fund stabilization funds as a percent of their budget is 17.99%. East Hampton is 15.25%, and Northampton is 14.74%. And again, if you look at just their regular stabilization, Amherst is at 9.89%. East Hampton is at 8.35% of their budget, and we are sitting at 4.32% in FY 2025, or excuse me, FY 24. And again, this is the just another graphic to show you in not words but pictures the difference between Amherst, or in comparing Amherst, East Hampton, and Northampton. And that is all I have. But I did want to just highlight again that, you know, we've talked a lot about free cash and what we should generate. And this year, right now, we're sitting at 6.9% of our FY25 budget for free cash, if you exclude ARPA. And as the mayor noted, the January 2025 DOR best practices for free cash says you will generate 5 to 7% and sit at that level. So I, you know, just wanted to highlight that DOR does recommend that we generate 5 to 7% in our free cash, and Northampton does a very good job to make sure that we're heeding those best practices and using those funds as recommended. For one-time funds, we use them for capital and for supporting reserves so that we have flexibility and can deal with things coming down the pike. And as the auditors have spoken, and you know, our outside auditor has mentioned, people that I speak with at the Department of Revenue, we're doing a very good job with our finances for the city of Northampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And before I go to the committee members to discuss this, could you email that slideshow or to count?
Absolutely.
Committee? I couldn't, it was hard to read. It looked like a lot of good information. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to have I guess we'll have a committee discussion, or at least ask questions about the presentation, and then we'll go to our second public comment period, and then the committee will focus on making recommendations around the orders. So committee members, do you have any questions or comments for either the director or the mayor? If she's here, I think she is. Yes. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. Shardine, is there any way that you could also email me that chart, please? I can't hear her.
She's saying yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of would like to get, I know we have orders to go through and the public waiting to talk. I mean, a few comments about some of the things the mayor touched upon. I mean, in terms of easing concerns, I don't think that the public's concern is that we have too much money in our funds. It's that we have that money and they feel the schools are not being sufficiently funded. So I don't think it eases, you know what I'm saying? The concern is, I think the concern about the funds is because of the schools. It's not, you know, it would be great if we had everything funded and we had really robust funds. So I just want to, you know, to kind of re-couch that. And I guess the other thing is, you know, I think what we're, you know, I think, and this is something, you know, I can talk to my committee members about, you know, getting on the same page with facts, and but I think we also need to kind of circle back, and because what I'm hearing is a different way of looking at it. Like, is, you know, I'd be curious, my committee members think the schools are kind of struggling or in crisis or need more funding. Maybe that premise isn't there, because it behooves, I hear what you're saying, Councilor Elkins, about, you know, if counselors have a problem, they should bring in, you know, what cuts they want to make. But it behooves all of us, you know, in city government, the mayor and council, to address a problem. I see the problem, you know, I see that the schools are struggling and are in crisis, but maybe we don't all agree on that. But the issue, you know, I guess it's kind of flipping it and saying, instead of saying, it's irresponsible to use funds this way. It's irresponsible to not fully and sufficiently fund our schools. So I think that's part of the disconnect. I'm just going to name that. I'm kind of picking up on that tonight. That we're not all on the same page about the problem, and we don't agree on the problem. Because I think the last budget cycle, we didn't we cut we ended up cutting jobs from the schools because the money isn't there. And now we do have actually. I understand, the policies and practices that you would like to follow, but we have some money, at least for a mid-year appropriation. And but I'm not hearing from other counselors that we agree that there's a problem. So I think I think it shouldn't always be on the kind of the back of the schools. I mean, they're the only operational department that was significantly cut in terms of staff. So I think we just need to it's like a thought exercise that it's not like with Alex, with Councilor Jarrett's equation too. It's like what are the consequences of of not putting money into the funds and not putting them in, or not funding capital projects. But we also, when we talk about that, I hope that we can also talk about what are the consequences of what's happening at the schools in real time right now. Yeah. Okay. So yes, Councilor Elkins.
So I'm happy to speak about that. So I certainly do and always have agreed that we don't have the funding that we all would like to have for our children, in our students. I don't call it a crisis though. I don't agree with that, and I come at that from a few points of view. One is that and I really try not to kind of bring it there, but that is not the lived experience in my household, and that is not to diminish anybody else's experience in the schools. But my kid is in Northampton Public Schools. I of course am involved and believe I understand what's going on in her school and for her, and while I absolutely do not suggest that her experience is universal or is the experience of everybody else. I do have some insight. I have been into those classrooms. I have spoken to her teachers, and I really try not to sort of bring it to that level and bring her into it. But I'm not out here coming at this with no personal insight or stake in the game. And I will say there's been a lot out there that has sort of just I'll just leave that alone. That being said, Kathy McNally mentioned this, that I'd offered this observation before, and I will say it again. I do not agree that spending money now, non-recurring funds, to fund staff positions that we will not be able to fund 2 and 3 and 4 years into the future solves the problem in any way whatsoever. I think it makes the problem worse. I think it means that we don't think collectively and responsibly about how we make the best use of what we have now in reality, and that it allows us to just keep kind of pushing the problem down the road. So yes, we could write a check this year for staff positions. The folks who have been advocating that we do that, notwithstanding all of the all the explanations and the facts on the ground about what's recurring, what's not recurring, and all of these things, I have yet to hear a suggestion about what we do 2 and 3 and 4 years out. this is so no, I don't think it's great the layoffs that happened in this last school year. I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to pass a budget that going forward won't call for more, and I'm more than hopeful. I'm optimistic based on everything that I know and everything that I see. I don't think that we solve that problem by throwing money in the short term and at the expense of our capital planning, our emergency planning. We're watching, across the country, LA is literally burning to the ground right now because of climate emergency. And I just, there was a time when if you look back at the history of what we were able to keep in reserve and keep for this city in terms of stability, things like the roof of Veterans Memorial Hall, where our employees work, would have literally shut the building down. The fire at Smith Voc, and the funds we were able to bring to bear to it was a fire and I think a tornado, all in short succession. We could not have dealt with those things with the kinds of reserves that we've had in the past, and that we remedied over a long period of time of thoughtful planning. And so no, I mean, I absolutely, it breaks my heart every time every year we get to the part of the discussion and we talk about the way that our Chapter 70 funds have just remained stable, and we are minimum fund district, and everything that we do to stretch to try and make up as much of that as we can. And I have supported that. I have voted for all of those things. So if you're asking me, I would not use the word crisis per se, but I don't disagree in the least that there is an issue. Just in terms of the numbers, one of the things that is very striking to me is that when you consider the city's contribution to, what it has taken for the city to year over year in the last several years maintain a basic 3% growth in the overall school budget, has meant that the city has had to give increasing numbers, which speaks to the flat line that is the state funding, and that's unsustainable. I don't know. That's unsustainable, and it's unrealistic at the state level to keep expecting us to do that. But I that math, I mean, it just resonates for me about what we are being asked to do as a city in order to just maintain. And then, of course, maintain in real dollars isn't the same thing as maintaining when adjusted for inflation and what that means in terms of staffing. So we do agree on that, but I do not at all agree that what is being suggested by some advocates is the solution to the problem. I value stability not for the sake of fiscal conservatism. I value stability because of what it means in the long-term out years, year over year, and what it means we can maintain for our students. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you kind of, sharing your personal experience and your perspective, because I think, maybe this would be a whole nother meeting where we reflect on the last year's budget season. But I think, one of the issues was people are saying, I'm scared for my kids. I'm worried for my classroom. And we were kind of answering with like stability funds or this or that. And I think what we needed to address, for better or for worse, I'm not even weighing in, is to say, this is what it's going to look like. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a little rough, but your kids are going to be okay. The classrooms are going to be okay, or they're not. And I just think we need to kind of own that, because it is a problem that we are responsible for addressing. So it's, even if we're not on the same page, that's good to know, because I think part of the issue, with the disconnect in the conversation is making assumptions about, what people, are believing or not believing and not agreeing on the numbers as well. So because I think you can't draw obviously different conclusions if you do think the schools are really struggling or in crisis, or if you don't. So I'm finding it refreshing to just talk about that for a minute. So thank you for that. Is there any other committee members? Yes, Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think there's any question that there's a problem and that the schools are struggling this year. I no longer have children in the public schools. They graduated years ago. But I have heard certainly from constituents and from educators, and I've listened, and there are negative impacts. And I think any city department that suffers the loss of 18 or 20 positions or more is going to be struggling because of that. So there's no question in my mind that there's a problem. And the concern that I have is how to, much as Councillor Elkins just articulated, how to solve it or attempt to solve it without creating, without delaying a sustainable solution, without creating, further in future years the same problem for, us or whoever's still in office, whoever is in office in 3 or 4 years. I think that it's telling that the fiscal stability plan has allowed at least 3% increases for the Northampton Public School budget during the past decade since it was created. The prior decade, as the mayor said, the school funding was very volatile and only exceeded 3% in a couple of years. It was not dependable. That is one very positive impact of the fiscal stability plan. Another very positive impact is creating the very reserve accounts that have allowed us to use $3.1 million in the last 2 years in the fiscal stabilization account to add money to the school budget in response to concerns that we've heard and that we've responded to. So that at least 3% increase during the past decade this year is now close to 9%. So that's the dilemma for me is the positive impact of the fiscal stability plan. I believe has been demonstrated. We have to figure out how to sustain that. I can't count on override producing more money until the override is approved. So the struggle for me is how to responsibly sustain a fiscal stability plan whose worth, I believe, has been demonstrated.
Well, Councilor Labarge, and then we'll go back to Councilor Elkins. Oh, you're muted, Councilor Labarge.
Thank you very much. We all know that we have a serious problem here, but number one, I want to thank the mayor for doing the presentation that she did. I think she did a great job on that, of letting people know exactly where the money's coming from, what the money and where it is going also. The issue I have is that Chapter 70 funding. That is the biggest culprit right there. Right there. If we had that, we would not have to be in a situation right now, all of us in the city who want that funding badly because everybody knows we need it. And I looked at our Senator Joe Comfort-Ford's website, and that's a big issue they're pushing on that Chapter 70 funding. I read it yesterday on her website, and I think they really are meaning going after it because we are hurting not just in Northampton, but other cities and other towns also. So I all think we need to do is stand up on our 2 feet and back our senators and our reps and make this happen. We got to do it because I think no matter what, with the Prop 2.5s, they're going to be good for about 3 years or so. Right now, if we go ahead and attempt to take away from this and that, how are we going to put that money back? We're not going to be able to. We're going to be behind again. So we're in a serious problem here. And I think right now, all the councilors, school committee members, everybody in the city needs to support our reps, our senators, and let them know we're with them because we need that to happen. That's the culprit right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Elkins. Oh, and then the mayor. Yeah.
I did want to just sort of follow up with the sort of the question about are we in crisis? Part of the reason why I'm hesitant to use the word crisis now is because I do foresee what crisis really looks like in this situation. And that is exhausting our reserve funds now, tapping one-time funds now that's not backed up by recurring revenue to fund staffing. And the reason I keep saying, 3 years out, 4 years out, whatever the case may be, is because that's what I see. That's where I see crisis. This seems like this does still seem admittedly very difficult, but this does still seem like within what we can pull together and work very hard with our superintendent, with our school committee, work with the people who are working to make the schools work as best as we can within our shared reality now. It is terrifying. It is terrifying to think about flat level section state funding. Too many about flat funding. Exhausted stability funds, an override that not passing. I mean, so part of my answer, and just to be really clear about it, and why it's really important to me, and I hope that people hear that I'm not minimizing the things that they're sharing now, and it's never I'm not minimizing, nor have I ever disbelieved anything that I've heard, and that people have shared. It is that I try to be precise in language, and I try and I want to just be really real about that there is a crisis that could come, and what crisis looks like. I truly don't know what the answer is, but we have to stretch what we have for as long as we can, because the state has shown over and over again that we cannot count on them. So that's because it would just be just devastating. And when I say crisis, I mean, and I'm really sorry. I mean, you asked, you want to have a conversation. When we talk about crisis, we're talking about buildings, our school buildings that are falling apart and we can't fix them. We're talking about roofs that are leaking. We're talking about the inability to air condition rooms as temperatures are steadily rising, and it's getting and approaching 80 and 85 and 90 degrees inside the school buildings. We're talking about crumbling Chromebooks that we can't replace because we haven't put aside the money. We're talking about reaching finally that point where we don't have the we don't have the stability funds to tap anymore. We don't pass an override, and the layoffs that would have to happen in that circumstance would make this past year look terrible. We're talking about choices where where us and the other communities around us who are in similar situations are essentially compelled to regionalize. whether we want to or not. There is a crisis situation, and I'm not, we can both agree that it is not good now and not as good as we want it to be, and also say that the only thing that we have in our control right now here in this city is to be as cautious as we can, as thoughtful as we can, to make what we have and our good fiscal management and our good planning stretch as far as we possibly can. And I do believe we're doing that. And so that's, sorry, you asked, so there you go.
And actually, we'll go to the mayor, but I'm really appreciating, I know this is tough, but I think, one good use of a subcommittee is to have these kinds of conversations, frankly, so that full council meetings aren't so overloaded, because we experienced that and it was a lot. So I'm glad that we're actually doing the kind of some of the hard work here. And I appreciate everyone being willing to do that. And the mayor, I believe, wanted to say something.
Yes, actually, I just wanted to say something. Councilor Labarge was talking about Chapter 70 and was talking about the work that Senator Comerford's doing and Rep. Sabadosa. And I wanted to also thank them for that they are really pushing very hard. But I also want to take an opportunity to thank the Youth Commission, who has really taken up this as something that they're working on, and not just in Northampton, but also in Amherst, and looking at different communities in our area. They produced a video. They went to the Capitol and had meetings, and have just really, I'm so grateful for their advocacy. As anyone knows, they are remarkable voices and very compelling. And I know that the meetings that they had in Boston had a big impact. And what I have heard is that the Senate president has indicated that she's also interested in working on Chapter 70, or sort of cracking it open, as Senator Comerford says, and there's sort of a growing recognition that this cannot go on like this, not just for Northampton, but again, we had so many more minimum aid communities in this past year, and so many just heart-wrenching conversations like this one happening all across the Commonwealth. And I think they are starting to realize we really need to look at it and make some changes. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the Youth Commission for all their great work.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So okay. So if no one has any more comments, I said we'd do another public comment round. I'd like this one to be 2 minutes, and this is a good opportunity to ask questions, as so it can be a question. And all right, so let's do that, and then we'll get back to our financial orders. Hold on, just one second. The cat decided to knock over a lamp, but no, I think maybe she's weighing in. I don't know about something. All right. So, okay. I see first Alex Bowman. And I guess you should still say your name and city.
Sure. Alex Bowman, Northampton. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. This discussion has been great. I've really appreciated it. Thank you, Mayor. I was not expecting that, but that was a great summary of municipal and school finance. And I agree with Councilor Elkins. I think of it as being stretched very, very thin. Again, I'm not trying to say that everything is great, but I just am afraid of making it a lot worse, and that is possible. And one thing that I said back in June at a school committee meeting is that the school committee isn't just about saying what they need. The school committee needs to balance needs and resources. And I think what they didn't do this period was to balance the needs and resources. They need to make those hard decisions about when the mayor says, hey, we don't have that money, where they need to help make those hard decisions rather than putting it on the city council. So that's my comment after hearing this discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I think Al Simon. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity to speak after some things have transpired. It's an unusual opportunity, and I appreciate that. It's so disheartening to be a citizen here, and about 9 months into this robust discussion about school funding, to still hear there's nothing we can do. I mean, that's been the entirety of what we heard. There's nothing we can do. Alex Jarrett is correct when he says there are trade-offs and choices. The implicit explanation here is we don't have enough money to do everything. And I accept that because I understand the world of municipal finance, I think, better than most. And what's clear is Northampton has made the choice. The government of Northampton has made the choice. And you chose to cut the schools and harm education. No way not to see it that way. You guys are either, unfortunately, unwilling to address this issue, and I think there are some people who believe that, or you're incapable of doing it because nothing's happened. I haven't heard one proposal from anybody collecting a paycheck whose job it is to do this stuff on what we could do differently than what we're doing today. The answer is always, there's nothing else we can do. And the finance director wants to pat herself on the back because we're doing such a great job here. How is it a great job when you're losing services? When you're shoveling money into the bank? How is that a great job? By the way, in May or June, the mayor proposed to do an override. Quickly took it back, and the reason was, there's been some new investments made by our treasurer. What we learned tonight, actually, is that decision by the treasurer was made at least 1 year before that, 1 to 2 years before that. Just to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oops. Melissa Masaborski.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Is your video working? You don't have to have it on, but
Yeah, no, I'll just unmute.
That's fine.
Thank you. Melissa Macaborski, I live in Northampton. My reaction to that presentation from the mayor, Charlene Nardi, and especially the comments by Councillor Elkins is wow. Support Our Schools will submit an official response to both of those presentations. So please stay tuned and be on lookout for that. I would like to ask one question, and that is that because Councillor Elkins is on the Capital Planning Advisory Committee and is a voting member of the Finance Committee, will she be recusing herself? We clearly need more time to talk about all of this, and I hope that we don't rush any of this through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Am I connected?
Yes. Sorry, I muted myself that time.
Wonderful.
Anyway,
Thanks.
go ahead, Tom.
Thank you for the interesting and honest conversation about priorities and the difficult choices that are associated with municipal finance in this era. Proposition 2.5, the option of charter schools, the Chapter 70 funding, the environment in which this conversation is happening. That conversation points to the requirement that choices get made. And I think that you are in the difficult position where you have to begin to make some of those choices. And I think that the conversation would be incredibly informed by and influenced by knowing what the operational budget of the city is going to be for next year. I think that you can't make decisions about what the consequences of choices about priorities and spending are without having full information, for example, about what the school budget will be, what will be proposed for next year. That hasn't been an informed part of the conversation. We know what the consequences of last year's budget have been and the concerns that people have about that. But I think you need the context of what to expect for next year. Thanks.
Okay, I see Nan. I'm unmuting you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the second opportunity to talk. You know, the first half of this meeting, I really felt good because I heard people accepting responsibility and really feeling it, not making excuses and saying we have to do things. Maybe look at budgets where we can save money, look at funds that we have. And then the fog machine comes in for an hour, and all of a sudden we're back to, oh, go look at the website for Senator Comerford and Rep. Savadosa, who was probably in school when we found out that Chapter 70 isn't going to change. We've been talking about this is our responsibility. And it's that fog machine showed us the myriad of places we can stash money for those rainy days. So we can't compare to others because we got more places to hide. And in those places, I can tell you place where we can get money for those capital funds. And it's not all of it, but looking into what we have is important. It's like the dog kennel. I did the math. My neighborhood did the math. You can spend maybe 5 minutes looking at the cost compared to building that and our cost now. It is an utter waste of time. It always was. It's like the 3.1 million church that probably would be spending another 8 to 11 million on because we paid for it to find out how much it was going to cost to repair it, and no one's needs. That's for. And I know it's not recurring funds, but we can put more money in budgets if we do that. Stop those projects, take the money back that's in there for them, and take responsibility for our schools. That was so disheartening. Stop deflecting and start doing something about this. I'm so sick of hearing it blamed on the school. And thank you again for doing this and for everybody who wants to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see. Anyone else before we move on to our orders? Okay. Okay. So,
Rachel, can we have a 5-minute recess, please?
Absolutely. So I'll see you all back here. Let's say, why don't we just say 9 since it's 9 minutes away. Okay, so 9 p.m. we'll be back here. Hopefully we'll be refreshed and get through our orders. See you.
9 o'clock.
Yeah, 9 o'clock. All right. Let me see if the committee's back. And I guess we're waiting for Councilor Labarge. Yeah, we're still, we'll wait another minute. There she is. Okay, so the committee members are back. All public comments and questions are closed, and we're going to go through our orders. Okay. So, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Council Mayor, before we start deliberating on the orders, I still would like to hear from the mayor about her thoughts on the bringing this forward earlier this year than in the past, and why that why she feels that's necessary.
Sure, gladly. Thank you for that question. And actually, Director LaStalia and Director McCarthy are here and can speak to it too. They were two of the main department heads that asked for us to do this earlier. So there are a couple things. One, when we go out to bid later, sort of in the springtime, you're getting very close to that construction season. It's a very challenging bid environment. The other thing is that, when we ask the departments to submit their projects in the late summer or very early fall, and so between that time and then March, April, when this gets approved, that's a huge amount of time. And as we've seen already, there's just massive increases in construction costs. So, something will be estimated and then the bid comes in so much higher than what the estimate originally was. So just that lag is really made it very hard to be able to do these projects because we're just seeing, 20, 30, 40% increases sometimes. So shortening that window gives us a better chance of getting better, more competitive bids, and that they come in closer to what they'd been estimated at.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm sure I can see everybody. So I would like to make, get out of here by 10 or before. So I don't want to kind of belabor this. I'm trying to think how we can, we can group things, and I could kind of tell you my thoughts, and maybe we can figure out how to kind of streamline this so we don't, have to have a late, go on later than that. So I did have a question. I mean, well, we could go order by order if you prefer. I'm thinking that maybe we could kind of talk about things that are kind of, concerns for us or questions, and then see if we can't group some votes together or something like that. What's the appetite for the committee members? Yes, Councilor Elkins.
I mean, I might suggest that if anybody has any specific orders that they are concerned about, that that they came in knowing they wanted to ask questions about or talk about, maybe we could pull those out. There's also a group. Well, and I guess the inverse is true. If there's anybody who's ready to sort of move for a recommendation, whatever, positive, negative, neutral, for any group, they certainly can.
Right. And I'm just talking about, I'm talking about A through K and not the items referred to free cash. So I'm just looking at A through K. Where's okay. I did have a general question, a question about the safety project at the high school. I'm very much in support. I know it was a very community-driven project, and the city's been very responsive. I'm getting a lot of emails. I don't know if there's any plans for a public forum where, that community, like the students or the, parents or teachers will be able to weigh in. I don't know how to answer. I don't really have a strong, opinion about what's right or wrong about it. I would like to, I think it should go ahead, but I don't want, I do think, I don't think it's micromanaging to want to kind of fund something that, we think is generally going to be a good thing for the community. And I don't know how much wiggle room it is once we approve funding. Like, can things be adjusted if the community, if these community conversations kind of yield something else? Like, what's going on with that? That was a big question I had. Yeah, Mayor.
And Director Lascalia is here and is the sort of the expert on it and maybe can speak to it. But so, I think she said at the meeting the other night, she's there through this whole process, she's worked with the PTO. I can say, I think I had my first meeting about this. It had to have been when I was still a counselor, because it was like 3 or 4 principals ago, which I know we've had a lot of different principals at the high school, but I've now met with at least 3 principals, 3 superintendents, and 2 police chiefs about this project, like at the school, and has sort of walked this area with them. So it's been something that we've been talking about for a really long time, and I know that Director Lascalia has been working with community members and PTO for a long time on it, and there's been a bunch of different public meetings where it's been talked about, and I think times when public has come out to talk about it, at those meetings. So there's been a good amount of engagement there. So I'm glad. I think it was Ben Spencer answered some of the questions that I heard someone else ask. There's an FAQ that Director Lascalia put together. She talked about that talks about this project. Yes, there's one of the things that's made this challenging is the parkland, which can't be touched. So none of that parkland is going away, and it makes the geography a little bit hard. But it's really an engineering issue, and we're trying to in the constrained space that we have, trying to make the safest plan possible, and that involves a lot of engineering, and it has to meet a lot of different warrants. So it's definitely been a challenging project, but there has been a lot of input that we've had, and I think has influenced this project.
Right. I mean, no doubt that there's been TPC as well. Everyone's put a lot of time into it. I guess I am curious about the wiggle room, because, or like with the Main Street redesign, there's this kind of visual, and I just don't know. I talked to some school committee members, and they were wondering if it was going to be brought there and discussed. And I just, because I'm, that's the school community. I'm not tuned into, specifically the school community and what they, if they've been, I hear PTO. Though I guess the reoccurring thing. So I guess my question is a couple things. I believe because it's of the ARPA funds, there's a time sensitivity. I think you said that, like that we had to, or maybe it's just the bidding that you wanted to start. And I guess I could group the emails I've received into mostly about the bike lane issues, but a lot about that section in the front, and how how the kids gather there, and now they feel like they're going to have to go over through 2 roads to hang out. Certainly, I'm not looking for consensus. I'm just kind of wondering. So we're approving the funds to start the project. So if you get, is there any latitude if it becomes apparent that tweaks are needed. I don't know. And also just really, I guess the main concern or the recurring concern is that bus area. I did tell people what you told us from the meeting about putting the lights up there, and that the difference between opening that up now versus when it was open before is there'll be a set of lights. So I guess that's the big concern. There's other, we heard a few tonight, and I certainly know from other big projects, you're never going to get consensus, but I do want to know, I guess, is there wiggle room? What's the time sensitivity? And is there a way, even if it's not about getting, is there a way, just an informational session for school committee or the school community or something, just to explain it? I'm just curious.
Okay. Director Liscalia, I don't know if, are you able to unmute? You may not be able to.
Oh, well, that's not good. Hold on.
Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone.
I have like the worst mouse. Okay, thank you.
Okay, hi, good evening. So I'm going to be going to the PTO meeting on January 14th. As I mentioned, I've been working with the PTO for several years on this. And so, I think we'll be doing a pretty good community conversation at that meeting. I have continued to use Transportation and Parking Commission as a forum to hear comments and feedback. The design certainly isn't final. I think, we've had a feasibility study and a really in-depth analysis that said the specifics of what we need to do, like traffic signals are warranted here based on volumes and collision analysis and so on. And that feasibility study and all of the appendices that have all of the data are posted on our website if folks are interested in reading through those. I think the specifics of the design around this, will the bike lanes be separated or not? Can the bike lanes be elevated? When we start moving bike lanes around, then we get into drainage. Now we get into sort of a utility reconstruction, and the price tag starts to become prohibitive on us. I think those details we can continue to work through. But I think that the general design, meaning like we're putting in traffic signals, I think that is set, and now it's just sort of details about what the space is going to look like. And again, we can continue to take community feedback on that and engage with our engineering firm to the extent that we can, understanding that we're working within a budget, we're working on top of utilities, that if we want to move them, the project, starts to become $4, $5, $6 million. And that's not the funding that we're working with. So I hope that answers some of the concerns.
Yeah. So is that PTO is it like an open meeting, public meeting? Just curious. The PTO meeting?
I don't know. It's at 7 o'clock on January 14th.
And
That's
then
details I've got.
And is it so I assume, you want to go out to bid soon, or I thought there was something because you were using funds from last year, you had to disperse of them at a certain time or something. But is there a time sensitivity?
I'm not ready to bid this project right now. I mean, the design is not
right. Okay.
Finalized. So I think this project is going to stretch over a couple of different construction seasons, and we have to contemplate what the right timing on this is. I think later in the year is going to be the right timing for this so that we can order materials over next winter. But again, we need to know what sort of an appropriation we're working with because we're continuing, with our $3 million project. So we have to understand what our funding is so that we can continue to make decisions around design. As we refine the design, the project estimate changes. So if community members are asking for things which are not part of the original design, if they're asking for, enhanced facilities that were not part of sort of our original estimate, there needs to be an understanding that $3 million price tag may actually not be $3 million anymore, and that's something we have to be very careful of.
Okay, so I won't request a zoo in the middle like I was going to. But so that's, yeah, I just think with these big projects, community buy-in will really help because we will, we're going to weather the construction. And I think we all, I think we're all know this is about safety and it's very important. But yeah, community buy-in would help. But I guess I'm heartened that it's not, everything's not exactly set in stone so that we still have time to kind of learn about it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, so that's, the other council, oh, yes, Councilor Moulton.
Well, you asked for suggestions about grouping, so I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to suggest, I'd like to group orders G through K. Those are the 5 borrowing orders for the 2 projects at Forbes Library, the DPW vehicles, the paving projects, and the sidewalks. I'd like to group those together and move a positive, move that we make a positive recommendation on those 5.
Second.
Okay, so motion made by Councilor Moulton, second by Councilor Elkins. Let me just look at those. Yeah, so I'm just going to say, just for keep the meeting brief, I support and I support all these projects. I looked over them. I'm having issues with the timing. I know some of those that you just mentioned, the director has said, we need to go out to bid with. But I'm going to vote for, my vote would be a neutral recommendation until we get to council next week, because I'd like to unpack in my own head what can kind of wait because of my concern about the separation of the budget. I mean, Councilor Jarrett's whole point was the interconnectedness and impact, negative and positive between, the SIP and the operating budget, basically, and free cash and the operating budget. So I'm thinking about that, but, I don't want to belabor this. So why don't we, so let's vote on those unless, is there any more discussion? Yes, Councilor Moulton.
Well, yes, I would like to hear from either the mayor or Director Nardi about why these 5 were chosen for borrowing and what any delay might mean in terms of seeking the loans for those.
I'll pass it to Director Nardi.
So the DPW vehicles and the paving are normal borrowing, bonding each year. We included the sidewalks in order to support those. Those projects were chosen because they're larger. They're above the $1 million. The Forbes Library projects were also, honestly, as we move forward and things fell off the borrowing off our bond and the percentage drops, I look for projects that I can fill in to bring that percentage back up. We have been maintaining about 4% of our budget since the pandemic. So those 2 projects fit in nicely. The plan was to borrow all of those, to borrow the Forbes Library, one of the Forbes Library in March of this year, along with the FY 2025 projects that were voted last year. So those will hit the FY 2026 budget, the operating budget.
And any concerns about delay?
Well, I will look to see which one I plan to do. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're referring to as a delay, like how long that would be. As I said, I would like to go out to bond in March for the FY 25 and the Forbes Library project. I think it's the $800,000 one. So if before March, I do not have any concerns, but I know Donna as well, as soon as she gets the borrowing authorization for her work, the sidewalk and paving, again, I will let her address like how this will impact her. And again, I'm not sure what the timing of waiting is, but I know she wants to go out to bid as soon as possible for the sidewalks and start with the paving, because again, she's competing for those services with other municipalities. So. I don't know if Donna, you want to.
Yeah, I just want to say that we have to have a number, meaning I have to know what the number is that's going to be authorized and if it's going to be authorized, because when we assemble our bid package, we have to put together a bid package that's several hundred pages long. And we have to know how we're bidding the projects. So I can't put out a bid package that's worth, $3 million in paving if there's not going to be an appropriation for that, because we'll get the bids back and then it's not an affordable project. So it's extremely important that as we're assembling the plan set, which is what we're doing now, and as we're developing the project, that we understand A, what the timing of the funding is going to be, and B, what the total amount of the appropriation is. In general, council has authorized borrowing for us in December. That's generally the schedule for the paving authorization. And that's so that we can develop our plans January, February, March, and then go to bid, because I know the number that I'm working with. I know that the money has been approved. So we are in a little bit of a tight window. And if there were to be a delay, my recommendation would be that we hold on the project for this year and we bid it in late fall, because we will not get favorable prices if we go to bid this in May, June, or July. And that's just the reality of the bid climate. So we either need to bid this in March, no later than March, or we need to hold on bidding this. But we can certainly bid it over the summer. I just don't think we're going to like the prices that we see. So that would be my advice.
Thank you.
And that's the order you're talking about. No, I lost it. The paving projects, right?
I'm talking about paving.
Yeah. Okay. Any other counselors? Kind of on my bad. That's one that I would positively recommend, but we have a motion on the full floor. That groups them together. My purpose is I want to go to council and talk to my the full council about the whole SIP process. So we can just vote on this, and then I can say my piece when we get to full council about kind of teasing out what can wait and what can't and such. So there's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? Oh, yes, Councilor Labarge. You're muted, Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. We have 5 orders that Councilor Moulton had suggested taken as a group, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the motion's on the floor. Okay, Laura, let's do so we're voting, doing a recommendation vote. And so Council Moulton, the motion on the floor is to positively recommend those 5 orders.
Correct.
Okay, let's go. Sorry.
Okay. Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
And Councilor Maori.
No. Okay, so those passed with a positive recommendation, and then I can explain my vote. And then I guess, so then we have the free cash order.
No, we have the other.
No, I missed one. Wait, what did you say?
I was just gonna say we have the other orders A through
8, right, sorry, 8, yes, excuse me. Okay, so order project, yes, so what are councilors? Any questions or comments about those? I'm wondering. about Council Moulton's grouping. So, Council Moulton, did you were you thinking in your head you'd group those differently?
No, no, I wasn't proposing that we group A through
Oh, okay. A through
F together.
Okay, no, that's fine. I thought maybe you were, there was different group. Okay. So we want to look at these individually, or? Okay. Items. So we have 24.188 in order to appropriate 200,000 from NPS Energy Project account to Leeds Capitoreum ERV project. Any discussion or questions? Councilor Elkins.
Just noting that I understand the project. I support the project. I would move I guess we'll just go ahead and move a positive recommendation.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to give it to Councilor Labarge, the second there.
Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah. I mean, this is my same feeling with these great projects. I want to get to full council and have a discussion about how we're going to deal with the SIP in general. So anyway, yes, Councilor Labarge?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that it was thoroughly explained to us.
Yeah.
Why this was needed for the Leeds school, and which was a big concerns about the proper ventilation in the school classrooms. And to me, this is valuable.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. So Laura.
Sure. Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
No.
And Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Okay. So B.
Councilor Maori.
Yeah.
If I may suggest, I mean, it's just at the risk of, it seems like we might be headed to a place that, because I understand your objection and what your goals are, but unless one of us has a specific order that they would recommend negatively, sort of on the merits of the project. Maybe we could dispense with this and move the remainder of them. I would move the remainder of them for a positive recommendation. I'm certainly free to, I defer to other members of the committee. If there's anything specific they would pull out for a negative recommendation, again, sort of on the merits of the project. Because I think I don't want, because I appreciate your position and understand, where this is going. But if we're going to, I don't know that we need to go through order by order to.
Well, that's why I was wondering if we couldn't group them together. But I mean, I could say, I could add positive with. I mean, my part of the project is approving. It's a timeline, and that's it's not the project, it's the timeline. But unfortunately, the timeline's going with the project. So, I could say, make that subject to or whatever, but
I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with. I mean, I'm comfortable moving forward a positive recommendation on the rest of the group, and certainly, and taking the vote and living with however my fellow committee members, see it. But I don't know. I don't know it's a great use of time to go line by line. So I would move the remaining orders a positive recommendation that we forward to council with the positive recommendations, which I believe orders B through F, I think.
That would be great. I think that's, I thought maybe for some reason the appetite was to go individually, but I'd much be, that sounds like a great plan to me.
Okay.
So you made a motion.
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Okay, and Council Labarge second that motion. Any discussion? Yes, Council Moulton.
Yeah, I think this is one place. I wanted to raise a question in response to Councilor Jarrett's suggestion that we needed to weigh relative harms.
Yeah.
And the question is really directed at, I mean, certainly the mayor can respond, but I think most pointedly at both Director McCarthy and Tony Kuzniars, and that is talk about the impacts of deferred maintenance on some of these building projects, roof projects, and other things that are in the two major orders here are 192, which is 1.75 million for various capital projects, and then the 194, the 7.4 million free cash to various capital projects. I'd just like to hear about the impact of deferring maintenance.
Good evening, Director McCarthy. Do you need, let me see if we can unmute you. Can you, let's see.
Here we go.
I'm having trouble with my trackpad.
Can you hear me now?
All right, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there you go.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, in my opinion, deferred maintenance always adds to the cost. That's simply said. The Memorial Hall is a perfect example of that right now. Some of the work, I mean, it's been deferred for decades, not just for a couple of years. And each time you have to push something into the future because of expense or whatever other reason, the cost goes up. It very rarely goes down.
I'd reiterate the same feeling. For example, the middle school loading dock replacement, a deferred maintenance is what we've had on that, and it's simply falling apart. That's just one small example. We can continue patching it and repairing it, but something like that ultimately needs to be replaced. And it just costs more money the longer we wait.
But Councilor Moulton.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
your
thank
point was with Alex Jarrett's paradigm. You're not talking about this budget season. I mean, that kind of deferred maintenance. You're talking over the long term deferred.
I am talking over the long term because I think that I certainly has happened in Northampton over decades, and particularly in the schools, where an easy way to balance the budget is to defer extraordinary maintenance, so that was the reason for that question.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions for the department heads or okay. Thank you. So if there's no more questions or comments, we can do a roll call.
Councilor,
yeah.
Yes. Positive recommendation for B through F. Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
No.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
And Councilor Moulton.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So those will all go with positive recommendations, and I will say my little piece. And let's see. I guess now we're down to 7 items referred to committee, free cash order. Yeah, I'm looking to, this was one I'd really like to move with a neutral recommendation because we have, a lot to talk about with this one. So it's, I think that's my prediction. So again, the same feeling that we, this is free cash, and we need to really be thoughtful about, talk to the full council about if this is the exact breakdown we want, or and that kind of thing. So that's my feeling on this one. How about other counselors? Counselor Elkins.
I would support this. I appreciate the desire to sort of push it back and discuss it to council. I don't that is not how I view not that the discussion isn't important, and I'm happy to engage in it. I do support this this order, and so I would be happy to vote to support that order. But so I would move a positive recommendation, and again, see how it goes.
Is there a second?
I'm going to second that.
All right, Councilor Labarge gives a second. So motion to approve 24.203 order to appropriate 2 million free cash to various reserve accounts. Laura, thank you.
Councilor Maori.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we have? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I went.
Sorry. No, sorry. So I just wanted to ask Director Nardi, the figures that were in your slide on the stabilization funds, these 4 stabilization funds, those are all up to date without this appropriation, correct?
Correct. So I did not. Yes. So only for orders that have already been approved.
Right. But those the figures that you use tonight are the current.
Correct.
Current amounts. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments by counselors?
The mayor.
Oh, Mayor.
I just wanted to make sort of maybe this is the obvious also other point is that any of the orders that haven't yet been approved, but like the orders that have funds coming out of those are also not reflected in those amounts. So the money in isn't in there, but also the money out isn't reflected in that chart.
Thank you.
So the other point I want to make is that we're moving money from the undesignated fund balance, that's where it's currently residing, to stabilization funds, including the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. That doesn't preclude using some of that money for additional money for the schools, because that's where that money has come from largely, that we've been adding over the last 8 months. So I don't think we're precluding anything tonight with a positive recommendation.
Well, except that for me, it's setting an intention. If I vote to positively recommend this go to a fund when I want it to go to a mid-year appropriation for the schools, I think I think that is kind of weighing in on that. So, yes, Councilor Elkins.
The other thing I would note sort of about the distribution of the various into the various stabilization funds is in particular all of them, but the special stabilization funds. The other thing too is that other some of this we have voted on. The establishment of some of these funds, and then of course the funding of some of these special stabilization funds. So I also think there is something to be said about that. Also, in making this distribution, it doesn't preclude another use, but it also, acknowledges that we'd made a previous decision as a council to establish these funds, and before we, change the use of these planned funds and deviate from this policy, not whether or not we do or that we don't, that we do it sort of subject to what has already been established. I believe the Climate Stabilization Fund passed unanimously and was established unanimously, and to me that is meaningful. That if we are going to maintain that policy and continue, and that if there is another specific order or change in policy or use, that we vote on that at the disbursement level, collectively, and with that. That we vote on at that disbursement level, sort of subject to a specific order, subject to a specific use. I mean, I don't think there's much to be done symbolically at this stage. We have this. We have to put the undesignated funds in appropriate places. We have a policy that we are that sort of guides what has been recommended. And I personally voted to establish, and to work on those funds and those funds and priorities. So it's not. So that's why I'm comfortable with this order at this point in time, and it doesn't preclude another, as Councilor Moulton said, it doesn't preclude a future conversation about a change in use of those funds or a different kind of disbursement. But subject to the laws around those kinds of funds and somewhat higher thresholds sometimes about the vote and all that kind of thing. I voted for the Special Education Stabilization Fund. I voted for the Climate Stabilization Fund. So I want to continue to be consistent and supportive of that. So that's
right. I'll just add that I'm not suggesting that I would obliterate those.
No, I don't think you are.
I'm just saying that, in terms of adding this specific amount, I'm not comfortable with that at this time.
So,
Councilor Labarge.
Yes, Councilor Mariano. We're looking at these 4 fundings, okay? The Capital Stabilization Fund, the Climate Mitigations, Sustainability Fund, the Financial Stabilization Fund, and the Stabilization Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Which one are you actually looking at?
Well, we're voting on it's one order. I'm not even saying we shouldn't put money in those funds. I want to talk about the specifics of that. And if we need to put that much money, and can we do something to help the schools mid-year? Do we really need to put every single dollar that's in this order in those funds? So it's one order. So that's my choice, is to vote. We can't tease apart the order, but so we can talk, if you'd like to talk about that at council, but I can't say that I right now think it's a good idea for us to put those specific amounts from the undesignated, free cash into those funds.
But what I'm hearing from you is that right now, you're not really happy because you would like more input from councilors at City Council, correct? About the feelings about looking at either one of these 4 of helping the schools. Is that correct?
Yes, I would like to have the discussion about some of this free cash going to a mid-year appropriation to the schools. Yes, that's what I would like to talk.
My question is, how much? Each one of them is 708,930. So, how much would you be looking at? That's my question here.
Yeah, no, and I actually will have, I kind of have that answer, but this is about recommending this order, so I was kind of hoping to talk about that but I see why it's, I can hear why it's relevant to you. I don't think, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Even with a positive recommendation, it still can be looked at City Council.
Sure, yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
I can see where you're coming at.
Right, because I mean, to restore, say, 18 positions, that's much less than for these orders. It's for mid-year, for a mid-year
And
appropriate.
that's good. We're going to talk about it at city council.
Yeah, so, right, so I just, even a small amount to go to some of the, what I feel are kind of, struggling things going or crises going on in this. I think that I would like to talk about the specific amounts. I'm not advocating getting rid of the funds. I'm not advocating not giving the funds money. I just want to talk about the amounts.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, if you positively or neutrally recommend, we can we'll actually vote on it on the following Thursday, and we can discuss it then, and we can offer amendments. So not necessarily vote it down, but offer an amendment or a recommendation or something. Those are all options for the council meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there is a motion on the floor and a second. So a motion to recommend 24.203 in order to appropriate $2.8 million for free cash to various reserve accounts. Laura.
Okay. Councilor Maori.
No.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
And Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, I believe. Okay, we already did our follow-up questions and comments. All right, so we're done with our agenda. I'm really looking forward to discussing these in council with you all, and I really appreciate, the discussions we had tonight. So thank you so much. I feel like we really did something kind of nice for the full council, which is we sat here as a subcommittee and really went to some tough places. So I appreciate it. And I would entertain a motion.
I've moved to adjourn, and I thank the chair for steering us through these tough discussions.
I'll second that.
Okay, Laura.
Okay. Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
And Councilor Maori.
Okay, so we are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.